Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories. The day Aveline Ashwood's husband came home with a younger Luna, the entire North Hall smelled of roasted venison and betrayal. She knew something was wrong the moment the iron gates groaned open at noon, because Garrick Blackmere never returned early from border campaigns. Garrick liked his wars the way he liked his ale, long, loud, and preferably involving someone else's suffering. For him to cut a 3-month campaign down to 6 weeks meant one of two things. Either the Eastern Wolf clans had surrendered spectacularly, or Garrick had found something more interesting than fighting. Aveline stood at the top of the stone staircase in Ashenmoor Keep, her hands dusted with flour because she had been in the kitchens again. She was always in the kitchens, not because anyone expected the Luna of Blackmere pack to bake bread, but because Aveline had discovered years ago that the kitchen staff were the only people in this entire frozen fortress who did not look at her with pity. My lady. Berta, the head cook, appeared at her elbow, breathless. Berta was 63 years old, built like a wardrobe, and possessed the singular talent of being able to communicate catastrophic news through the angle of her eyebrows alone. Right now, both eyebrows were practically touching her hairline. He's brought someone. He always brings someone. Last time it was 47 prisoners of war and a stolen catapult. It's not a catapult. Is it bigger than a catapult? Berta's mouth pressed into a line so thin it nearly disappeared. It's younger than a catapult. Aveline set down the bread dough. She wiped her hands on her apron slowly, methodically, the way she did everything, not because she was calm, but because she had learned that if she moved slowly enough, people assumed she was in control. She walked to the narrow window that overlooked the main courtyard, and she looked down. Garrick Blackmere rode through the gates on his black warhorse, his dark hair wind-tangled, his jaw sharp enough to cut accusations, his silver-gray eyes catching the winter light in that way that had once made her heart stutter. He was, as always, devastatingly handsome. 6 feet and 4 inches of alpha wolf wrapped in black leather and the unshakable conviction that the world owed him something. Beside him, on a white mare with ribbons braided into its mane, rode a girl. She was perhaps 23, golden-haired, pink-cheeked, wrapped in white furs that looked brand new. She rode with the particular posture of someone who had been told she was precious approximately 400 times that morning. And on her left wrist, Aveline's wolf eyes could see it clearly from this distance, was a Luna binding mark, fresh, still faintly glowing with the amber light of a completed ceremony. "Ah," Aveline said. "My lady. That is a very nice horse she's riding." "My lady, he's bound her. The mark is—" "I can see the mark, Berta." Below, the household guard was assembling. The servants were gathering. Garrick dismounted with the easy grace of a man who expected applause for existing, and then he turned and lifted the golden-haired girl down from her horse with both hands on her waist, and she giggled. She giggled. Aveline had not giggled in approximately 4 years. She was 31 years old, and she had been Garrick's Luna since she was 22. And she had run this household through 2 border wars, a grain famine, a collapsed mine shaft, 3 outbreaks of river fever, and the time the East Tower caught fire because Garrick's beta had tried to roast a whole elk indoors. She had earned every single gray hair that she did not yet have but fully expected by next winter. And now there was a girl in her courtyard wearing her title. "Well," Aveline said, untying her apron and folding it neatly, "I suppose I should go down and introduce myself. It would be rude not to." "My lady, you don't have to." "Berta, if I don't go down there right now, I will have to go down there later, and later I will have had time to think about it, and if I think about it, I will be forced to acknowledge that my husband of 9 years has ridden home with a replacement wife like she's a new pair of boots, and I will feel something about that, and I don't feel like feeling something right now, so I'm going down." She went down. The great stone staircase of Ashenmoor Keep had 114 steps. Aveline had counted them during her first week as a new bride, giddy and in love and absolutely certain that Garrick Blackmere was the greatest man alive. She counted them again now. 114 steps between who she had been 5 minutes ago and who she was about to become. The courtyard was full by the time she reached the bottom. Garrick's warriors had dismounted. The household staff had formed their usual receiving line. And there, standing at the center of it all like a painting of a saint who had wandered into the wrong chapel, was the golden-haired girl, clinging to Garrick's arm. Garrick saw Aveline. She watched it happen, the flicker of something in his silver eyes. Not guilt, exactly. Garrick Blackmere did not do guilt. It was more like the brief inconvenience of remembering that you had left a candle burning in a room you no longer intended to use. Aveline. Garrick. This is Lenora. She is the daughter of Lord Voss of Goldenmere. How nice. What is she doing here? Lenora smiled. It was a sweet smile, practiced and perfect, the kind of smile that had probably been rehearsed in a mirror decorated with dried wildflowers. I'm so honored to finally meet you, Lady Ashwood. Garrick has told me so much about. What is she doing here, Garrick? The courtyard went quiet. Even the horses stopped shifting. Garrick straightened. He was taller than Aveline by nearly a foot, and he used that height now the way he always did. Not as a weapon exactly, but as a fact. A reminder that the world was built for men of his size, and everyone else was just borrowing space. Lenora is my mate, he said, my true mate. The bond awakened during the Eastern Campaign. I have already completed the Luna binding. There it was. Spoken in front of 50 people, the household guard, the kitchen staff, 2 stable boys, and a pigeon that had been sitting on the gate and was now regarding the whole scene with visible judgment. Your true mate, Aveline repeated. The pull was undeniable. I resisted for weeks, but... Weeks? You resisted for weeks. I know this is difficult. You resisted for weeks. She let the words sit there. We were married for 9 years, Garrick. 9 years. And you resisted this girl for weeks. I'm genuinely impressed by your restraint. Lenora's smile wavered. She looked up at Garrick with wide, uncertain eyes. You said she would understand. She will understand, Garrick said, and his jaw tightened in that way that meant he had already decided how this conversation was going to end and was merely waiting for reality to catch up. Aveline looked at him, really looked at him, at the face she had kissed 10,000 times, at the hands she had held through nightmares, at the man she had believed was her home. She did not cry. She had cried exactly once in her marriage, the night their first and only pregnancy had ended at 3 months, and she had bled alone in their bed because Garrick had been at a council meeting and no one had wanted to interrupt him. She had decided after that night that crying was a currency she could not afford to spend on people who would not value it. You're right, she said. I understand perfectly. Then she turned to Lenora and she smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who had balanced 9 years of household accounts, negotiated grain prices with merchants who thought female Lunas were decorative, and once physically carried a wounded border scout 6 miles through snow because the patrol wagon had broken an axle. Lady Lenora, welcome to Ashenmore Keep. I'll have the servants prepare a room for you. The East Tower is lovely this time of year. The roof leaks only when it rains, but it almost never rains here, so you should be fine. She looked back at Garrick. Except it's winter, and winter means snow, and snow melts. So I suppose the roof will leak constantly, but I'm sure your true mate is very resilient. Then she walked back inside. She made it all the way to the kitchen before her hands started shaking. Berta was waiting. Berta was always waiting. The old cook took one look at Aveline's face and said nothing, because Berta was the kind of woman who understood that sometimes the most compassionate thing you could do for someone was to simply witness their composure without testing it. I need to leave, Aveline said. Yes, my lady. Tonight? Yes, my lady. He'll try to keep me here, for appearances. The pack expects a proper transition of Luna status, and Garrick won't want the Northern Territories to think he discarded his Luna without cause. He'll want me to stay and smile and hand Lenora the household keys in some ridiculous ceremony so it all looks civilized. Then we don't give him the chance. No, we don't. Aveline's mind was already working. She had always been like this. She felt things deeply, but processed them practically. Heartbreak could wait. Logistics could not. "I'm taking the ledgers," she said. "The household ledgers?" "All of them. 9 years of accounts, grain contracts, trade agreements, mine yields, border patrol rotations, and the tax reconciliation files. I wrote them. I organized them. They're in my handwriting because no one else in this keep bothered to learn double-entry bookkeeping. Without those ledgers, Garrick won't know how much grain is stored, how much is owed to Goldenmere, or when the next shipment of iron is due." Berta stared at her. Then a slow, magnificent grin spread across the cook's weathered face. "You brilliant girl. Also, I'm taking the spice cabinet. The saffron alone is worth more than Lenora's horse. I purchased every ounce of it with my personal dowry funds. It's mine." Berta laughed. It was a low, dangerous laugh, the laugh of a woman who had survived 3 husbands and trusted none of them. What else? Aveline considered. "My mother's silver, my books. The winter medicine stores, I compounded them myself, so they're mine, and the cheese." "The cheese?" "The aged Firewolf cheese in the cold cellar. 42 wheels. I spent 3 years perfecting that recipe. Garrick doesn't even like cheese. He won't miss it until his new Luna tries to host a feast and realizes there's nothing in the larder but salted pork and regret." By evening, Aveline had packed 14 crates. She had done it quietly, efficiently, with the help of Berta and 2 kitchen maids who had volunteered without being asked, because it turned out that the household staff had opinions about Garrick's romantic decisions, and none of those opinions were favorable. The problem was leaving. Ashenmore Keep sat on a rocky plateau surrounded by pine forest on 3 sides and a sheer cliff drop on the 4th. The main gate was guarded. The postern gate was locked at sundown, and Garrick, for all his emotional failures, was not stupid. He would expect her to try to leave, and he would have instructed the guards to prevent it, not out of love, but because a discarded Luna wandering the northern roads was politically inconvenient. Aveline was standing at the kitchen window, considering her options, when she heard the noise. It came from the old granary behind the keep, a low, rumbling sound, half growl and half whimper. She knew that sound. She had heard it before, on border patrols, in the deep forests. It was the sound of a wolf. Not a shifter wolf, not a pack wolf, but a real wolf, a wild one. She should not have gone to investigate. She had 14 crates to move, a keep to escape, and a rapidly narrowing window of time before Garrick decided to summon her for whatever humiliating conversation he was surely planning. But the sound was wrong. It was pain-wrong, and Aveline had never been able to walk away from pain-wrong sounds, which was how she had ended up married to Garrick in the first place, because 9 years ago she had heard a wounded soldier howling in the rain and had gone to help him, and the wounded soldier had turned out to be the most handsome alpha she had ever seen, and he had looked at her like she was the only warm thing in a cold world, and she had loved him. She had loved him so much. She went to the granary. The wolf was silver, not gray, not pale. Silver, like moonlight, had been hammered into fur. It was enormous, easily twice the size of a natural wolf, with eyes that shone the pale blue of glacier ice. It was also very clearly injured. Its left hind spring-loaded things that Garrick's father had set decades ago, and no one had bothered to remove. The wolf snarled when it saw her. "I know," Aveline said. "I wouldn't trust me either. Everything in this keep has terrible judgment." She approached slowly. She had done this before, not with wolves this large, but with injured animals in the forest. The key was to make yourself boring, unthreatening, the kind of creature that clearly did not have the ambition to be a predator. "I'm going to look at that trap," she said, keeping her voice level, "and then I'm going to open it, and then you're going to not bite my hand off because I need my hands. I have 14 crates of cheese and spices to load onto a cart tonight, and it's really hard to drive a cart with stumps." The wolf watched her. Its ice-blue eyes tracked her every movement with an intelligence that was not entirely animal. Aveline knelt beside the trap. It was rusted, but still brutally functional. The iron jaws had bitten deep enough to draw blood, but not deep enough to break bone. She studied the mechanism. She knew these traps. She had spent her first year as Luna systematically disarming them across Blackmere territory because she thought they were barbaric, and Garrick had let her because it had not seemed important enough to argue about. "This is going to hurt," she told the wolf. "I'm sorry." She pressed the release lever with both hands. The jaws opened. The wolf yelped, a sound that was far too dignified to be called a yelp, but there was no other word for it, and yanked its leg free. Then it just sat there, looking at her. "You're welcome," Aveline said. "Now please go away."
Everyone in the kingdom knew one rule: never, under any circumstance, touch the Dragon King. Not his hand, not his cloak, not even the air too close to his skin, because the moment flesh met flesh, it turned to ash. And yet before the entire royal court, she grabbed his hand, and nothing happened. No fire, no scream, no smoke rising into the vaulted ceilings of the throne hall. Just silence. A silence so deep it felt like the world itself had stopped breathing. And that was the moment everything began to unravel. She had always been invisible, not in the mystical sense. No magic cloaked her presence. No spell hid her face. She was simply nothing. A servant girl born without a wolf, in a kingdom where even the lowest child carried the pulse of the beast beneath their skin. Among warriors and nobles who could shift into creatures of fang and fury, she remained painfully, humiliatingly human. They called her Empty, a name whispered in corridors, laughed behind goblets, spat like something bitter on the tongue. She scrubbed floors where nobles walked. She lowered her gaze when alphas passed. She learned to make herself smaller, quieter, less noticeable than the shadows that stretched along the stone walls. Because in a world ruled by strength, weakness was not pitied. It was erased. The day of her humiliation arrived wrapped in silk and cruelty. The royal court had gathered every alpha, every noble bloodline, every ambitious eye turned toward the great hall for a ceremonial demonstration of loyalty. Servants were brought forward, one by one, to kneel before the throne and swear their service. It was a tradition meant to reinforce order, but for her, it was something else. A spectacle. When her name was called, a ripple of quiet amusement moved through the court. "Bring forward the wolfless one," a noblewoman murmured, her voice dripping with delight. She stepped forward, barefoot against cold marble, her hands trembling despite every effort to steady them. The weight of hundreds of eyes pressed down on her like a physical force. At the center of it all sat the Dragon King. He did not move. He did not speak, but the air around him shimmered with heat. Even from a distance, it was suffocating, like standing too close to a forge that had never once cooled. His presence was not simply powerful, it was wrong, unnatural, as though his body rejected the world around him, burning everything that dared come near. She had heard the stories. Servants who brushed against him gone in an instant. Guards who tried to steady him, reduced to ash before they could scream. Even his own advisors kept their distance, because the Dragon King was not just feared, he was untouchable. "Kneel," came the command. She dropped to her knees. "Swear your loyalty." Another voice followed. Her throat tightened. The words felt heavy, foreign. Loyalty implied value, purpose, worth, things she had never been allowed to possess. Still, she opened her mouth, and then it happened. A guard behind her shoved her forward, hard. Her balance broke. Her irreversible moment. She reached out. Her hand slammed against his. The court gasped as one. Some screamed. Others turned away, already expecting to witness her death. But no fire came. No flames devoured her skin. No ash drifted into the air. Instead, the Dragon King froze. His fingers, which had never held another living being without destroying it, remained still beneath her touch. His eyes, cold, ancient, and terrifying, snapped downward to where their skin met. And for the first time in years, the fire around him flickered. She should have pulled away. Every instinct screamed at her to let go, to retreat, to beg forgiveness. But something held her there, something deeper than fear. Because for a single, impossible second, the heat was gone, not lessened, not weakened, gone, and in its place was something else, something steady, something alive. Don't move. His voice was low, commanding, and laced with something no one in that room had ever heard from him before. Hook. The court erupted into chaos. How is she not burning? This is impossible. She touched him. The nobles rose from their seats, whispers turning into sharp, frantic voices. Some looked at her with horror, others with calculation. But the Dragon King did not look away from her. Not once. Stand, he ordered. She obeyed, her legs barely able to support her weight. Slowly, carefully, he turned his hand, still holding hers. Testing, waiting, watching. Nothing happened. No fire, no destruction, only silence. Bring her closer, he said. The command sent a wave of unease through the court. Your Majesty, one advisor began, pale with fear. I said bring her closer. No one dared argue again. She was guided, pushed, really until she stood directly before the throne, close enough to feel the remnants of heat still clinging to him, close enough to see the truth no one spoke of. The Dragon King was not in control. His power was consuming him. Look at me, he said. She hesitated, then obeyed. His eyes burned not with flame, but with something far more dangerous. Need. What are you? He asked. She swallowed. Nothing, Your Majesty. The answer echoed through the hall, and something shifted in his expression. Nothing. Does not survive me, he said quietly. From that moment on, her life no longer belonged to her. She was taken not to the servant quarters, not back to the shadows, but to his chambers, a place no one entered, a place no one survived. The first night was a test. She stood across the room, every nerve in her body alive with tension as he approached. Slowly, deliberately, like a predator, unsure of its prey. Do not run, he said. She didn't, not because she wasn't afraid, but because something deeper had taken hold. Curiosity. His hand lifted, hesitated, then pressed against her arm. Nothing. No fire. No pain. Only warmth. A sharp breath escaped him, not from exertion, but from relief. Rav. Unfiltered. Addictive. Again, he whispered. And this time, he didn't stop at her arm. Days turned into nights. Nights into something dangerously close to routine. He tested the limits of her presence, her skin, her proximity, and each time, the same result. She neutralized him, calmed him, silenced the fire that had ruled his existence. But there was a cost. She began to feel it, not immediately, not obviously, but slowly. Something inside her drained, like standing too long in winter, unaware of the cold creeping into your bones. And beyond those walls, the court watched, waited, plotted, because power like that could not remain unchallenged. And someone had already decided, if she could touch the Dragon King, then she could kill him too. The first attempt to kill her came before dawn. She woke to the scent of smoke, but not from the king. This fire was different, thin, bitter, crawling beneath the door of the small chamber they had given her beside his own. For one frozen heartbeat, she thought his curse had finally reached through the walls and found her in her sleep. Then she saw the black oil spilling beneath the door, saw the orange glow rising beyond it, and understood the truth. Someone had locked her inside and set the corridor aflame. She stumbled from the bed, coughing, her hands scraping against stone. But the window was too narrow, the door too hot, the smoke too thick. Outside, no guards shouted, no footsteps came. Whoever had done this had chosen the hour well. She pressed both palms against the burning door, expecting pain, expecting skin to blister, but the heat sank into her like water into dry earth. The flames bent toward her, not away, toward her, and deep beneath her ribs, something ancient stirred. She gasped as the fire vanished through the cracks, rushing into her palms in ribbons of gold and crimson until the corridor beyond fell dark. When the door finally burst open, the Dragon King stood on the other side, half-dressed, barefoot against scorched stone, his eyes blazing with terror so violent it almost looked like rage. He did not look at the burned walls. He looked only at her hands. "Who did this?" he asked. She opened her mouth, but no answer came, because behind him, standing among the guards with perfect calm, was Lady Seraphine, the noblewoman promised by blood treaty to become his queen. And she was smiling. From that morning onward, the palace changed. The servants no longer called her empty where the king could hear, but their silence became sharper than insults. The nobles lowered their voices when she passed. The royal council demanded answers the Dragon King refused to give. Seraphine, beautiful as polished ivory and cold as a blade left in winter, began visiting the throne hall every day, dressed in red silk as if she already wore his fire. She never accused the servant girl directly. She did not need to. She merely asked questions in front of the court. Why had a wolfless slave survived what every warrior could not? Why did the king summon her at night? Why had his fires weakened since she came near him? And most dangerous of all, was she saving him or slowly binding him? The council listened, and fear did what fear always does in royal courts. It gave cowardice the appearance of wisdom. The Dragon King grew more restless as the whispers spread. He called her to him more often, not only when the curse flared, not only when the flames crawled up his arms and cracked the stone beneath his feet, but when the silence inside him became unbearable. At first he only took her hand. Then he began to keep her seated beside him during council meetings, where the nobles stared as though a servant on the king's right hand was a greater crime than murder. At night, when the fire beneath his skin raged hardest, he would stand in the dark and say nothing until she crossed the room to him. The first time she placed both hands against his chest, he trembled. The great Dragon King, conqueror of 7 wolf kingdoms, the man whose name made rival alphas kneel, trembled beneath the touch of a girl who had once scrubbed ash from his hearth. "Does it hurt?" she whispered. His jaw tightened. "Always." And that single word broke something in her, because until then, she had believed monsters did not suffer. But each time she calmed him, she weakened. Her fingers turned cold after touching him. Strange gold marks appeared beneath her skin, faint at first, then brighter, like veins filled with sunlight. She hid them beneath sleeves, but the king noticed. Of course he noticed. He noticed everything about her now, the way she swayed after standing too long, the way her breath caught when his fire surged, the way she lied when he asked if she was well. One night, he caught her wrist before she could hide it. The gold lines glowed between them. His expression darkened. "You are paying for this." She tried to pull away. "It is nothing. Do not lie to me." His voice was quiet, but the room seemed to bow beneath it. "Everyone in this palace lies to me. You will not." She looked at him then, truly looked, and saw not the king, not the curse, not the living fire, but the man trapped inside it. "If I stop," she said, "you burn." His grip loosened, not because he wanted to release her, but because the truth had wounded him more deeply than any blade. That was the beginning of his restraint, and the beginning of her danger. He tried to keep distance. She saw it in the way he folded his hands behind his back when she entered, the way he stood across the room though the fire visibly tortured him, the way he dismissed her before nightfall even when sweat burned at his temples. But the curse punished him for mercy. Without her touch, his body rejected the world with renewed violence. Candles melted before he passed them. Iron handles glowed red beneath his fingers. The stone floor cracked wherever he stood too long. On the third night, his monstrous form emerged. It began with wings, not fully formed, not free, but shadows of them tearing from his back in a storm of heat and black flame. His spine bowed. Scales rose along his neck. His eyes turned molten gold. The guards fled before he could command them to stay. Only she remained, frozen in the doorway as the Dragon King became the beast his enemies prayed he would become. He roared, and the windows shattered outward into the night. "Leave!" he forced through clenched teeth. "I cannot hold it." She should have obeyed. Every sane part of her begged her to run. But then he looked at her not as a king, not as a beast, but as a man terrified of what he might do. And she crossed the broken glass barefoot. "Do not come closer," he growled. She kept walking. I said, "Leave." The flames rose higher, circling him like a living crown. She stepped through them. They bent away from her skin, then rushed into her body, bright and terrible. When her palms touched his face, the beast inside him shuddered. His claws dug into stone. His wings collapsed into smoke, and slowly, impossibly, he leaned into her hands like a starving creature finding warmth for the first time. By dawn, every courtier in the palace had heard what happened. By noon, Seraphine had turned rumor into accusation. By dusk, the royal council summoned them both before the throne. Not the Dragon King's throne, the ancient judgment seat beneath the Hall of Ashes, where kings themselves could be challenged if the council believed the realm was endangered. It was a trap, and he knew it. Still, he went, because kings who refused judgment looked guilty before history. She stood beside him in plain gray linen, surrounded by nobles in jewels and armor, feeling smaller than ever beneath the painted eyes of dead rulers. Seraphine stepped forward with a silver dagger in her hand and a softness in her voice that fooled no one. "Your Majesty," she said, "we do not question your strength, we question hers." She turned toward the court. A wolfless slave appears from nowhere, survives dragonfire, drains the king's power, and now his curse worsens whenever she is absent. "Is that salvation or possession?" the council murmured. The Dragon King's hand curled into a fist. Heat rolled across the floor. She felt it searching for her, reaching instinctively, but he held himself back. Seraphine saw it and smiled. Let her prove innocence. Let her touch the sacred flame. At the far end of the hall, an ancient brazier burned with white fire, said to reveal forbidden blood. No servant was allowed near it. No liar survived it. The girl's stomach dropped. The Dragon King turned on the council. "No." His voice shook the pillars. "This judgment ends now." But Seraphine had already won the room. "If she is nothing," she said, "then nothing will happen." They dragged her forward. The king moved, and 20 spears lowered toward him, not because the guards could stop him, but because the council wanted the kingdom to see him choose violence for a servant. She looked back at him once. His face was carved from fury and fear. "Do not touch it," he commanded. But for the first time since she had entered his life, she did not obey. She placed her hand into the white flame. The hall exploded with light. Not fire, not smoke. Light. Vast, golden, ancient light surged from the brazier and wrapped around her like a crown remembering its queen. The gray linen burned away into luminous ash, but her skin remained untouched. Across her arms, the hidden gold veins blazed into the shape of scales. Behind her, the shadow of enormous wings unfurled against the wall, not his wings, hers. The court fell to its knees without understanding why. The white flame rose higher, forming words in a language older than the wolf kingdoms, older than the dragon throne, older than betrayal itself. The Dragon King stared at her, as if seeing the answer to a question his blood had been asking all his life. Then the oldest counselor whispered the name no one had spoken for 3 centuries. The Ember Blood Heir. Seraphine's smile vanished. The truth broke over the hall like judgment. She was not wolfless because she was empty. She was wolfless because no wolf could live inside dragon blood. She was the last descendant of the ancient Ember Blood Queens, the royal line that had once balanced the Dragon Kings, not by serving them, not by obeying them, but by anchoring the fire inside their bodies so it would not consume the world. Her blood did not absorb his flame by accident. It recognized him, and his fire did not spare her because it was weak. It spared her because it had been searching for her since the day he was cursed. Seraphine lunged before anyone could stop her. The silver dagger flashed toward the girl's heart, but the Dragon King moved faster than flame. He caught the blade in his bare hand. For one breath, the court expected the dagger to melt. Instead, blood ran down his palm. Real blood. Human blood. Because while she stood within the sacred flame, his curse was silent. For the first time in years, he could bleed instead of burn. He looked at the blood in wonder. Then he looked at Seraphine. "You tried to murder my queen." The word queen shattered the last illusion of order. Rival alphas rose. Seraphine screamed that the Ember bloodline was cursed, that the servant had bewitched him, that no court would bow to Ashborn blood. The traitorous commander of the royal guard drew his sword and declared the king unfit, claiming the council's authority to seize the throne before dragon madness destroyed them all. And then the war, hidden beneath courtly manners, finally revealed its teeth. Chaos consumed the Hall of Ashes. Wolves shifted between pillars, tearing silk and armor as they lunged. Flame spiraled from the ancient brazier. The Dragon King fought without unleashing the full curse, because she was still too close, still glowing, still draining herself to keep him whole. He saw her knees buckle, saw the light in her veins flicker, and for the first time, he chose not to take what she offered. He chose to give something back. He crossed the hall through blood and fire, seized her hand, and pressed it against his chest. "No more," he said. "You will not die keeping me alive." She looked up at him, trembling. "If I let go, you become the curse again." His eyes softened in the middle of battle, impossibly, painfully. "Then let the curse take me." But she understood then what he did not. The bond was not meant to be one way. She was not born to be consumed. She was born to command the balance. So when the commander raised a black iron spear forged to pierce dragon hearts and hurled it toward the king's back, she stepped in front of him. The spear struck the light around her and stopped inches from her chest. Her eyes ignited gold. Her voice, when it came, did not sound like the servant girl they had mocked. It sounded like a throne waking from a long sleep. "Kneel." Every flame in the hall obeyed. The sacred brazier, the torches, the burning banners, even the fire beneath the Dragon King's skin surged outward and bowed toward her. The wolves froze. The nobles dropped to the floor as pressure filled the hall, ancient and absolute. The commander screamed as his black spear melted into dust. Seraphine staggered backward, all her beauty stripped bare by terror. The girl looked at her and saw every corridor insult, every cruel smile, every hand that had shoved her toward death. But she did not burn her. She did something worse. She spared her before the entire court. "Let her live," she said, "so she remembers whom she called nothing." The Dragon King looked at the girl then, not with possession, not with hunger, not with the desperate need that had first chained them together, but with reverence. He lowered himself to one knee before her. The court gasped, because Dragon Kings did not kneel. Not to councils, not to gods, not to fate. Yet he knelt before the servant girl with ash on her feet and fire in her blood, and he placed his wounded hand over his heart. "I choose her," he said, his voice carrying through the ruined hall. "Not because she saves me, not because my curse demands her. I choose her because every soul in this kingdom saw her suffer and called it weakness, while she carried a power greater than all of us, and still chose mercy." The mate bond struck like thunder. It was not soft. It was not gentle. It was a collision of ancient fire and living blood, a force that cracked the white marble beneath them and sent golden flames spiraling into the broken roof. She felt him not only his power, but his loneliness, his agony, every year of untouchable silence. Every night he stood alone, afraid to breathe too near another living thing. And he felt her, the girl who had scrubbed floors while royal blood slept hidden in her veins. The child who had been called empty so often she nearly believed it. The woman who could have let the world burn, and instead chose to hold it together with her bare hands. When the light faded, the curse was changed. Not gone, not destroyed, transformed. The Dragon King's fire no longer lashed blindly at the world. It moved beneath his skin like a sleeping beast, answering to two hearts instead of one. He reached for her slowly, not because he feared burning her now, but because choice mattered. She gave him her hand. This time, the touch did not drain her. Warmth passed between them, equal and steady. His thumb brushed over the gold marks on her wrist, and they softened into delicate lines like a living crown beneath her skin. Seraphine and the traitorous commander were taken away before sunset. The corrupt council was stripped of authority, its eldest members forced to swear before the sacred flame they had tried to weaponize. The rival alphas who had come hoping to witness weakness bowed instead to a union older than their bloodlines. And the servant quarters, where she had once slept, nameless and cold, were opened by royal decree. No child born without a wolf would again be called empty in his kingdom. That night, she returned not to the small chamber beside his, but to the high balcony overlooking the Black Mountains, where dragon fire once lit the sky in lonely storms. The king stood beside her, no longer surrounded by unbearable heat. For the first time, snow began to fall over the volcanic peaks without melting before it touched the stone. He watched it with quiet wonder, then looked at her as though the world had given him something too fragile to deserve. "You could leave," he said. "After everything this palace did to you, no oath binds you here." She turned her palm upward, the same hand that had once accidentally saved him before the entire court. "And if I stay?" His breath caught, and she saw the feared Dragon King become simply a man afraid to hope. "Then I will spend the rest of my life proving you were never born to be used." She stepped closer. "I was not born to be your cure." "No," he said, lowering his forehead to hers. "You were born to be my equal." And when he kissed her, the kingdom did not burn. The mountains did not crack. The ancient curse did not rise to punish them. Instead, deep beneath the palace, the sacred flame turned gold, and every wolf in the capital lifted its head as one, sensing the birth of a bond powerful enough to change the fate of kings. The girl once called Empty stood beside the Dragon King as the last Emberblood queen, no longer hidden, no longer owned, no longer afraid of the fire that had tried to devour them both. And for the first time in his cursed life, the Dragon King slept with her hand in his, not because he needed her to survive the night, but because he had finally found a world that did not reject him. But peace did not come simply because the Dragon King had chosen her. In kingdoms built on old blood and older pride, love was never allowed to arrive without a blade hidden beneath it. By morning, the entire capital knew that the servant girl once called Empty had stood in the sacred flame and survived, that the Dragon King had knelt before her, that the court had watched his curse bow to her blood. Some whispered her name with wonder, others with fear, but the most dangerous ones whispered it with hatred. Because a girl raised among ashes had done what noble daughters had failed to do for years. She had touched the untouchable king, and instead of dying, she had become the one person no throne could ignore. The palace tried to dress her in silk before sunrise, but every gown they brought felt like a costume stolen from someone else's life. She stood before a polished bronze mirror, while 3 trembling attendants fastened gold clasps around her wrists, and all she could see was the same girl who had once scrubbed soot from hearthstones until her hands cracked. Only now, beneath her skin, golden lines shimmered faintly, pulsing whenever the Dragon King drew near, and he was always near. Not openly at first, not in a way the court could easily name, but his presence followed her like a storm refusing to break. Guards doubled outside her doors. Poison tasters appeared at every meal. Corridors emptied before she walked through them, not because she commanded it, but because he had made one thing clear without saying it twice. Anyone who touched her without permission would answer to fire. Yet protection could become another kind of cage, and she felt it before he did. The first week after the reveal, he tried to keep her away from every council session, every public ceremony, every noble gathering where resentment might sharpen into danger. "You have survived enough courts," he told her one evening, as red dusk bled through the balcony arches. You do not need to endure another room full of smiling wolves. She looked at him carefully, at the man who had once demanded her touch, because his own body was a prison, and she understood the fear beneath his command. "If I hide now," she said, "they will say I am only powerful when you stand in front of me." His jaw tightened. "Let them say it. I have lived my whole life beneath names other people gave me." Her voice did not rise, but something in it made the torches flicker. Empty, wolfless, servant, threat, curse. I will not add coward to that list. For a moment, anger flashed across his face, not at her defiance, but at the world that had taught her to defend her own existence with every breath. Then the anger faded, leaving only the ache he did not know how to hide. "I cannot lose you," he said. And there it was, the truth neither of them had fully spoken. His need for her had begun as survival, but now it had become something far more dangerous, because a king could command armies, conquer borders, burn enemies from the earth, and still be helpless before the thought of one woman disappearing from his reach. So she went to the council chamber the next day, not behind him, beside him. The nobles watched her as though she were a flame brought indoors, beautiful, only until it spread. The remaining counselors bowed, but their eyes betrayed them. They saw the servant's posture beneath the new silk. They saw the faint gold under her skin. They saw the king's hand resting close to hers, not touching, but ready. The meeting began with land disputes from the northern wolf packs, tribute failures from border lords, and petitions from minor houses suddenly eager to prove loyalty. But beneath every word lay the same question. What was she now? A queen? A weapon? A cure? A threat? Then Lord Vare, an elderly alpha with silver hair and a voice like dry parchment, rose from his seat. "Your Majesty," he said, never once looking at her. "With respect to the old laws, no woman may sit beside the dragon throne until formally recognized by blood trial, council assent, and royal bond sealing." The chamber grew quiet. The Dragon King's eyes darkened. "Choose your next words with care." Lord Vare bowed his head just enough to avoid open rebellion. "I ask only for order. The girl's blood may be ancient, but it is unverified beyond spectacle. Sacred flame can be manipulated. Prophecy can be misread, and a mate bond, especially one formed under distress, may be a curse wearing the face of destiny." The words struck exactly where they were meant to. Her fingers went cold. A curse wearing the face of destiny. She had wondered the same thing in the darkest corner of her own heart. Did he want her? Or did his fire want her? Did she stay because she chose him? Or because her blood had been made for his? The Dragon King rose slowly, and heat rolled across the table. "You accuse your king of being bewitched. I accuse no one," Lord Vare said. "I ask for proof." Proof became the weapon they used against her. The council could not deny what the court had seen, so they demanded more. If she was truly Emberblood, she must enter the mirror crypt below the palace, where old queens had once faced the memories of their line. If she emerged with the ancestral mark, the court would recognize her claim. If she failed, the council would declare her an unstable magical anomaly and place her under royal confinement. For her own protection, the Dragon King refused at once. The mirror crypt had not been opened in 3 centuries. No one knew what waited beneath it, but the more he refused, the more the council looked at her as if she were a frightened servant hiding behind a monster. And so, before he could burn the chamber down with politics still inside it, she stood. "I will enter." His head turned sharply. "No." She met his eyes in front of them all. "Yes." The room held its breath, sensing the first true fracture between them. He leaned closer, voice low enough only she could hear. "You do not understand what ancient places take from living blood." "Then tell me." Pain moved through his expression. "I cannot. The old records were destroyed." "Then you do not know it will kill me." "I know everything this court asks of you is meant to cut you until you bleed obedience." Her heart twisted, but she did not look away. Then let them see what rises when I bleed. The mirror crypt opened at moonrise. The entrance lay beneath the Hall of Ashes, sealed behind a door of black stone veined with gold. When the Dragon King pressed his palm to it, the stone did not burn. It recognized the altered fire in him now, the flame steadied by their bond. With a groan like the earth remembering pain, the door parted. Cold air breathed out, not the clean cold of winter, but the ancient cold of sealed grief. She descended alone because the law demanded it, though she felt him above her with every step. Their bond stretched thin between them like a thread of flame. Down below, the crypt was not a tomb. It was a palace beneath a palace, carved from obsidian and filled with mirrors taller than towers. Each mirror reflected a different version of her. In one, she was the barefoot servant girl. In another, a queen crowned in fire. In another, a corpse with gold cracks across her skin. She walked forward, and the mirrors began to whisper. They spoke in voices like women singing through smoke. Daughter, Ashborn, hidden flame, last of the line. Then the reflections changed. She saw a battlefield from centuries before. Dragon kings burning entire armies because no Emberblood queen stood beside them. She saw women with her same golden veins chained by rulers who loved their power more than their souls. She saw one queen place both hands on a king's chest and burn away into light while he survived, weeping over ashes. She stumbled back, horror tightening around her throat. This was the truth the legends had hidden. Emberblood women had not always been honored. Sometimes they had been consumed. Sometimes they had been called destiny, when the world meant sacrifice. Above, the Dragon King felt her fear through the bond and nearly broke the law to go after her. The council watched him from a distance, tense and eager, waiting for grief to make him reckless. His fists clenched so hard the stone beneath his feet cracked. In the crypt, she reached the final mirror. Unlike the others, it reflected nothing. Its surface was dark, still, and endless. When she touched it, the glass softened like water and pulled her inside. Suddenly she stood in a chamber of white flame, and before her waited a woman crowned in embers. She was older, regal, sorrowful, with the same gold-lit skin and eyes that seemed to carry every dawn ever born. "You are late," the woman said. The girl could barely breathe. "Who are you?" "The first queen who refused to die for a king." The words struck harder than any vision. The woman moved closer, her gown trailing sparks across the unseen floor. "They told you your blood exists to save him. Does it not?" The queen's smile was sad. "Your blood exists to balance fire. Balance is not surrender. It is not obedience. It is not letting a man, even a wounded one, turn your life into medicine." Tears burned in her eyes before she could stop them. "Then why does touching him feel like coming home?" "Because some bonds are true," the queen said softly. "And some truths still become chains when fear holds them too tightly." When she emerged from the crypt hours later, dawn had turned the sky pale above the broken roof of the Hall of Ashes. The entire council waited. So did the Dragon King. He looked as if he had not moved once all night. The moment she stepped through the black door, his control nearly broke. But he stopped himself, waiting for her choice, for her signal, for permission to cross the distance. That restraint, more than any vow, told her the crypt had not lied about him. He was capable of need without taking, love without consuming, power without possession. She lifted her hand. Only then did he come to her. The council saw the mark before he reached her. A crown of gold fire glowing at the base of her throat, delicate and unmistakable. Lord Vare went pale. The blood trial had not merely recognized her, it had crowned her. The Dragon King stopped in front of her, his eyes fixed on the mark, and for one fragile breath, the feared ruler of the realm looked humbled beyond words. "What did it show you?" he asked. She answered honestly, because the bond between them could not survive pretty lies. "That women like me have died saving men like you." The words landed in silence. His face changed, and she saw the wound open in him. Not anger, shame. He stepped back at once, as though his closeness itself had become a threat. Then, "I will never ask again. That is not what I said. It is what I should have understood." His Volproti. His voice roughened. "I called you my equal before the court. Then let them send you beneath the earth to prove you deserve to stand beside me." She reached for him, but this time he did not take her hand. "I have spent years fearing my fire would destroy anyone who came near me," he said. "I never feared that my need might do the same." And then he turned away, not because he did not love her, but because he did. That emotional retreat became the cruelest distance between them. He protected her still, honored her publicly, gave her authority the court could not ignore. But he stopped reaching for her in the quiet, stopped asking her to calm the fire when it hurt him, stopped sleeping with her hand in his. At first, she told herself, this was what freedom should feel like. Space, choice, no demand. But every night, through the bond, she felt his pain flare behind walls of restraint. She felt him walking alone in chambers scorched by his own skin. Felt him biting back roars until blood filled his mouth. Felt him choosing suffering because he had mistaken distance for respect. And she, proud enough not to beg and wounded enough to doubt, let the silence grow. The palace noticed. Seraphine, though imprisoned in the Western Tower awaiting judgment, noticed most of all. Hatred sharpened her patience. From behind iron bars, she began sending messages through servants still loyal to her house. If the Emberblood girl had created distance between herself and the king, then the curse could be turned again. And if the curse returned in full before the realm, the council would have its proof that neither love nor ancient blood could save him. The attack came during the Moon Tribunal, a gathering of the werewolf kingdoms under the Dragon King's rule. Alphas from the Frost Packs, the River Clans, the Ironwood territories, and the Southern Red Wolves filled the great amphitheater beyond the palace walls. It was a night of public oaths, where each pack renewed allegiance beneath the full moon. She stood beside the throne in a gown of deep ember gold, her ancestral mark visible for all to see. The Dragon King stood apart from her by several steps, a distance no one else understood but everyone felt. Rival Alpha Kale of the Ironwood Pack watched that distance with predatory interest. He was broad, scarred, and ambitious, a ruler who had obeyed only because the Dragon King's curse made rebellion suicidal. But now, the curse had weakened. The king bled, the servant queen doubted, and men like Kale could smell fracture the way wolves smelled blood. When the sacred horn sounded, each alpha approached to kneel. Kyle came last. He bowed lower than required, then looked up with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Your Majesty," he said, "we are honored to see the realm steadied by your companion." The insult was wrapped in silk. The amphitheater chilled. The Dragon King's fire stirred, but he held it down. She stepped forward before he could speak. "You may address me as Emberblood." Kyle's gaze slid to her throat. Blood is easy to claim in times of fear. A murmur passed through the packs. Power is harder. Then he did the one thing no one expected. He drew a small silver chain from his cloak and threw it onto the moonlit stone between them. Attached to it was a collar blackened by dragonfire, her old servant collar. Gasps rippled outward. "I found this in the lower quarters," Kale said, "a touching relic. Tell me, my lady, does royal blood remember the feel of a chain?" The humiliation hit like a slap. Not because the collar exposed her past. Everyone knew what she had been. But because for one moment, she was back there again. Barefoot, nameless, laughed at, by people who believed cruelty was proof of rank. The Dragon King moved. She felt his rage before the flames appeared. The air warped. Stone groaned. Kale wanted exactly that. If the king unleashed fire before the assembled packs over an insult, he would look unstable, ruled by attachment, weakened by the woman he claimed as equal. She reached for him through the bond, not with magic, but with a single, silent plea. "Do not let him make me your wound." The flame stopped inches from the ground. The king's eyes burned white gold, but he did not strike. She bent, picked up the collar, and held it before the entire tribunal. Her voice carried across the amphitheater. "Yes," she said. "Royal blood remembers the chain. It remembers who fastened it, who ignored it, who benefited from it, and who now fears the neck beneath it was never bowed, only waiting." Then she closed her fist. The collar melted not from his fire, but from hers. Golden flame poured between her fingers, clean and controlled. The Pax went silent. Alpha Kale's smile faded, but Seraphine's true plan had not been humiliation. It had been poison, not in wine, not in food, in the sacred horn itself. When it sounded again for the final oath, the note carried a forbidden resonance, an ancient anti-dragon spell hidden in music, designed to awaken the curse and sever any balancing bond. The sound ripped through the amphitheater. The Dragon King staggered. Fire burst from his skin in a violent ring. Wolf screamed as heat slammed into the stone seats. She rushed toward him, but the force threw her back. For the first time since the bond formed, his fire did not recognize her. His eyes turned molten and empty. Wings of black flame tore from his back. Scales climbed across his face. The monstrous form returned, larger and more terrible than before. The assembled alphas drew weapons. Kale shouted, "Behold your king!" And the rebellion began. The amphitheater descended into war beneath the moon. Wolves shifted mid-leap, their bodies twisting into massive beasts that charged the throne. Dragon fire spiraled upward, uncontrolled, striking pillars and turning banners into suns. The Dragon King fought himself harder than he fought them, roaring as he tried to pull the flames inward before they reached her. She could feel him somewhere beneath the curse, trapped behind burning walls. She ran toward him again, but Alpha Kale intercepted her in wolf form, a massive iron-gray beast with jaws wide enough to crush her spine. He lunged. She raised her hands, and golden fire formed a shield just as his claws struck. The impact drove her to her knees. Around her, loyal guards battled traitors, packs turned on packs, and above them all the Dragon King's monstrous shadow blotted out the moon. Kyle shifted back just enough to speak, blood on his teeth. "You are not his salvation," he snarled. "You are the leash, and I will free the realm from both of you." He struck again, and this time her shield cracked. She was still learning power that her ancestors had carried from birth. He was a war, Alpha, forged through decades of violence. He drove her backward across the broken stone until her shoulder slammed into the base of the throne. The Dragon King saw it, even through the curse, even through the spell tearing his mind apart. He saw Kale standing over her. Something human awakened inside the beast. He roared Kale's name with such fury that every wolf in the amphitheater froze. But when he tried to move toward her, the anti-dragon resonance twisted tighter around him, turning his own fire inward. Black cracks spread across his chest. He was burning from within. She understood then that Seraphine had not meant merely to expose him. She had meant to make him destroy himself before the realm. There are moments when fear ends not because courage arrives, but because love becomes more unbearable than death. She rose despite the blood at her temple, despite the trembling in her legs, despite the ancestral queen's warning that balance must never become sacrifice. This was not surrender. This was choice. She stepped past Kale and walked into the inferno surrounding the Dragon King. The flames struck her like 1,000 blades. Her skin lit gold. The bond screamed. He saw her coming and fought to retreat, but chains of sound held him in place. "No," he growled, voice broken between man and beast. "Do not." She kept walking. "You told me I was your equal." "Yes, then stop deciding alone what I am allowed to risk." His monstrous eyes filled with pain. "I will kill you." She reached the center of the fire and placed both hands against his burning chest. This time, she did not absorb. She commanded, "Then find me before you do." The world vanished into flame. Inside the curse, she saw him. Not the king, not the beast, but the boy he had been before power became punishment. A child standing in a nursery of burning curtains while adults screamed beyond the door. A prince whose dragon blood awakened too early, too violently, incinerating the nurse who tried to comfort him. A young ruler taught never to touch, never to cry, never to desire closeness because desire made him dangerous. A man crowned, not by triumph, but by isolation. He had not rejected the world first. The world had recoiled from him until his body learned to do the same. She moved through that memory fire and found him kneeling in the center of it, hands covered in ash. "I am tired," he whispered. "I know," she said. "I have burned everything. Not me." He looked up at her, eyes haunted. "I wanted to." The confession would have frightened anyone else. But she heard what lay beneath it. Not cruelty, but terror. He had wanted to hold her so badly that need itself felt monstrous. She knelt before him. Wanting is not taking. She held out her hand. "Come back." When they emerged from the flame, the amphitheater was silent. The Dragon King stood in human form, shaking, his face streaked with ash and tears. No one dared acknowledge. Her hands remained pressed to his chest, but the gold light no longer drained her. It flowed between them in a circle, fire answering blood, blood answering fire. The anti-dragon spell shattered with a sound like glass breaking beneath the moon. Across the amphitheater, the sacred horn cracked open, revealing a hidden black rune carved inside. Every eye turned towards Seraphine's tower in the distance. Her betrayal was no longer rumor. It was proof. Alpha Kale, seeing the rebellion falter, made one final desperate move. He seized a fallen spear and charged not at the Dragon King, but at her. The king turned, but she lifted one hand. This time, she did not need saving. The ground beneath KL erupted with golden flame, not burning his flesh, but binding his shadow to the stone. He collapsed mid-stride, unable to move. She walked toward him slowly, the entire tribunal watching. "You wanted proof of power," she said. "Here it is." Kyle strained, veins bulging in his neck. "Kill me then." She looked at the assembled packs, at the nobles, at the soldiers who had once watched her humiliation as entertainment. No. Death is too easy for men who mistake cruelty for strength. She turned to the Frostpack Alpha, an older woman with silver eyes who had not joined the rebellion. Let him stand trial before the packs whose sons he brought here to die for his ambition. The Frost Alpha bowed, not to the Dragon King, to her. That bow changed everything. One by one, the loyal Alphas knelt, not from fear of dragonfire, not from obligation to the throne, but because they had seen the girl once mocked as wolfless stand between madness and massacre and choose justice over vengeance. The Dragon King watched them kneel before her, and no jealousy touched him, only pride. Fierce, quiet, devastating pride. When she returned to his side, he did not reach for her in front of them all. He waited. She slipped her hand into his. The gesture was small, but the amphitheater felt it like a coronation. Seraphine was brought down from the western tower before dawn. She had traded silk for prison gray, but even chained, she held herself like a woman who believed beauty could still command mercy. They brought her into the damaged throne hall, where the sacred flame now burned gold instead of white. The council gathered, diminished and afraid. The packs stood witness. Seraphine looked first at the Dragon King, then at the girl beside him. Hatred flickered, but beneath it was something uglier. Grief. "It should have been me," she said. Her voice was raw now, stripped of courtly music. "I was raised for him, trained for him, promised to him. Every lesson, every ritual, every breath of my life was shaped around becoming queen. Then, a servant touched his hand by accident, and destiny threw me away. For the first time, the girl saw not only the villain, but the wound that had fed her. It did not excuse the murders, the fire, the poison, the rebellion, but it made the cruelty human, and somehow that made it worse. The Dragon King's voice was cold. You tried to burn her alive. Because she took the only future I was allowed to want. Seraphine turned to her then. Do you think mercy makes you better than me? You stand there with his hand in yours because fate chose your blood. Had it chosen mine, you would still be scrubbing floors. The words struck deep because part of them was true. Fate was not fairness. Blood was not virtue. Power did not make suffering meaningful. The girl stepped closer. You are right about one thing, she said. If my blood had never awakened, this court would have left me in chains. The hall stilled. That is why the court must change. Seraphine blinked, thrown by the answer. You expected me to deny it. I will not. This kingdom does not become just because I rose within it. It becomes just when no girl needs ancient blood to be treated as human. The sacred flame flared behind her, as if the old queens approved. Judgment was passed before sunset. Seraphine was stripped of title and sent to the northern monastery fortress. Not as a guest, not as a martyr, but as a prisoner under oath, where she would spend her life healing those burned by the wars her family had funded. Lord Vare and the corrupt counselors were removed from office. Alpha Kael was delivered to the Pack Tribunal. The traitorous commander, who had survived the Hall of Ashes, confessed under sacred flame that half the rebellion had been planned months before the servant girl ever touched the king. They had always intended to overthrow him. She had merely become their excuse. That revelation spread across the kingdom faster than fear. People began to understand that the Dragon King's curse had not been the only danger in the realm. Men without fire had done just as much burning, but victory did not heal everything. In the days that followed, she struggled beneath the weight of her new name. Emberblood, Queen-marked, Flamebinder, Savior. The words changed depending on who spoke them, but each one tried to turn her into something larger than a person. In private, she still woke from dreams of the Mirror Crypt, seeing ancient queens vanish into the men they loved. Sometimes she pulled her hands away from the Dragon King before realizing she had done it. Sometimes he flinched from touching her, haunted by the same fear from the other side. Love had saved them in battle, but ordinary tenderness required a different courage. No prophecy could teach them how to sit together in silence without wondering who owed what to whom. One night, weeks after the rebellion, she found him in the old nursery of the East Wing. It had been sealed for years. The walls were still scarred by fire, though someone had tried to cover the damage with tapestries. He stood before a small blackened cradle, his face unreadable. She remained at the doorway. Is this where it began? He nodded. I was 4. The number made her chest ache. 4 years old, and already treated as a disaster. They told me later I had killed a woman who loved me. His voice was steady, but she knew what steadiness cost him. After that, no one entered my room without gloves, chains, or fear. She crossed the room slowly and stood beside him. You were a child. Children can still destroy. Yes, she said softly, but they should not be left alone with the ashes. He closed his eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he said, when you first touched me in the throne hall, I wanted to lock every door in the palace and keep you where no one could take you. The confession hung between them, dark and honest. I know. I am ashamed of that. Good, she said, and his eyes opened in surprise. She smiled faintly, sadly. Shame means you know the difference between love and hunger. He looked at her then, as if she had placed a blade in his hand and trusted him not to use it. And do you trust me? She took time before answering, because the truth deserved more than comfort. I trust the man who fights his hunger. I do not trust fate blindly. I do not trust crowns. I do not trust need when it goes unnamed. She reached for him. But I trust what you choose after you name it. His hand trembled before he took hers. That night, he did not ask her to calm the fire. She did not offer to. They simply sat together on the nursery floor until dawn touched the burned walls. And somehow, that became more intimate than any desperate touch before it. No curse forced them. No court watched them. No prophecy demanded proof. When his fire stirred, he breathed through it. When her gold marks glowed, she let them fade naturally. They were two wounded creatures learning that love could be quiet and still be real. The coronation came at midsummer. Not a wedding first, though the court expected one. She insisted on recognition before romance, law before ceremony, change before celebration. The Dragon King agreed without hesitation, and that agreement did more to silence opposition than any threat could have. Before the gathered kingdom, he amended the old hierarchy. Wolfless children could no longer be enslaved by packhouses. Servant collars were outlawed in royal territories. Any noble found using blood status to claim ownership over another living soul would lose title, land, and protection. The alphas shifted uneasily at the decrees, but none dared oppose them openly. Not after the Moon Tribunal. She stood beside the king while the laws were read, hearing whispers ripple through the crowd. Some called her dangerous, some called her impossible. But in the back of the hall, among the servants, a little girl with no wolf stared at her with wide, shining eyes. That was the moment the new queen nearly wept. Only after the laws were sealed did she agree to the bonding ceremony. It was not held in the throne hall, where humiliation had first made them visible to each other, nor in the Hall of Ashes, where power had been revealed through violence. She chose the ruined garden behind the East Wing, a place long abandoned because nothing had grown there since the Dragon King's curse first scorched the soil. On the morning of the ceremony, servants cleared the ash, opened the stone channels, and brought water from the mountain springs. She walked barefoot over the black earth in a gown the color of dawn. The Dragon King waited beneath the skeletal branches of an ancient tree, dressed not in armor, not in conquest black, but in simple, dark ceremonial robes edged with gold. He looked less like a weapon that day, more like a man standing before the possibility of being loved without fear. The bond vows were older than the Wolf Kingdoms. He spoke first, voice low enough for intimacy, strong enough for the gathered realm. I do not claim you as cure, shield, possession, or destiny's payment. I choose you as sovereign of your own fire. I choose your will above my need, your freedom above my fear, and your life beside mine only so long as you desire it. The words moved through the crowd like wind through dry grass. Many did not understand how radical they were. She did. Her throat tightened, but when she spoke, her voice did not break. I do not bind myself to your pain as sacrifice, nor to your throne as ornament. I choose the man who came back from the fire when I called, the king who knelt not to own me, but to honor what he had failed to see. I choose your hand when it is offered, never when it is demanded. I choose the flame we carry together. Then she placed her palm against his chest, and he placed his over her heart. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the dead garden bloomed, not slowly, not with the gentle patience of spring. It erupted. Black soil split open, gold-veined flowers burst from ash. Vines climbed ruined pillars. The ancient tree above them shuddered, and leaves of deep crimson unfurled across its branches like living fire. The crowd gasped as petals drifted through the air, glowing faintly before dissolving into warmth. The Dragon King looked around in stunned silence, then down at her. You did this. She shook her head, smiling through tears. No, we did. And when they kissed beneath the reborn tree, the fire that rose around them did not threaten the world. It illuminated it. Years later, songs would claim that the servant girl saved the Dragon King with a touch. Songs always preferred simple lies. The truth was harder and far more beautiful. She had not saved him by letting herself be consumed. He had not loved her by needing her more fiercely than anyone else. They saved each other in the places where power was not enough, in restraint, in truth, in the painful choice to unlearn every cruel lesson the world had carved into them. The Dragon King still carried fire beneath his skin. The Emberblood Queen still bore gold in her veins. The kingdom still had wolves with pride, nobles with ambition, borders with enemies, and histories that did not vanish because one crown changed hands. But in the palace where servants once lowered their eyes and no one dared touch the king. Children now ran through the rebuilt garden, laughing beneath crimson leaves. Some had wolves, some did not. None wore collars. And on quiet nights, when snow fell over the volcanic mountains and the sacred flame burned low beneath the palace, the Dragon King would wake from dreams of ash to find her beside him, not as a cure, not as a chain, but as a choice renewed with every dawn. Sometimes he would reach for her hand in his sleep, then stop before touching, still honoring the line between need and permission. And every time, she would smile softly in the dark and place her fingers through his. Not because fate commanded her, not because the curse demanded it, but because she wanted him, because the world that once rejected him had become, in the circle of her palm, a place where he could finally rest.
Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories. Chapter 1: The Hall of the Moon Vow. The Moon Vow Hall of the Black Pine Pack had stood for 400 years, and in all that time, no Luna had ever been replaced in front of her own people, on the night of her own renewal ceremony, while wearing the ceremonial silver she had polished herself that morning. Seraphine Marlowe had that honor. She stood at the foot of the moonstone dais where she had stood every winter for 6 years, her golden hair braided with pine sprigs in the old way, and watched her mate, her alpha, her first love, the man whose fever she had once sweated out of him with her own hands for 9 straight nights, walk into the hall with another woman on his arm. The whispers started before Roderick even reached the dais. They rolled through the packed hall like wind through wheat. Who is that? A northern lady. Look at the fur on that. A northern lady. Look at the fur on her cloak. That's white winter cloak. That's white winter fox. That's a fortune on her shoulders. Where is she? That's a fortune on her shoulders. Where is she supposed to stand? There's only one place for a woman to stand up there. Roderick Blackpine was, as always, devastatingly handsome. That was the cruelest part. If he had been ugly, if he had been dull or coarse or weak-jawed, Seraphine might have convinced herself she had never really loved him. But Roderick was tall and dark-haired and built like a war poem, with gray eyes that could make a woman forget her own name when they softened, which they used to do, often, when he looked at her. They did not soften now. He walked with the northern woman past the long tables where Seraphine had arranged the winter feast herself. The roast venison she had traded 2 bolts of good linen to secure, the root vegetables from the cellar she had reorganized in September, the honey mead she had bartered from the river merchants using a credit line she had personally guaranteed. He walked past all of it as though it had appeared by magic, and he stopped at the foot of the dais, and he did not look at Seraphine. "Members of the Black Pine Pack," Roderick said, and his voice filled the hall the way it always did, like a bell rung inside a cathedral. "Honored elders, bonded families. Tonight is the night of the moon vow, when the Alpha reaffirms his bond and presents his Luna to the watching moon." Seraphine's hands were steady at her sides. She had rehearsed her part. She would step forward, Roderick would take her hand, they would speak the old words, and the winter would be sealed. She had done this 5 times before. She knew the cadence of it, the way she knew her own heartbeat. "Tonight," Roderick continued, "I present a new bond." The hall went so quiet that Seraphine heard a log shift in the great fireplace 30 feet away. "Lady Alara Winterbourne, of the Northern Winterbourne family, has accepted the position of Luna of the Black Pine Pack." The woman beside him stepped forward, and Seraphine got her first real look at the person who was replacing her. Alara Winterbourne was beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful. precise, polished, and utterly without warmth. She had dark auburn hair coiled at the base of her neck, skin like parchment that had never seen honest sun, and eyes the color of frozen river water. She wore white winter fox across her shoulders and a gown of midnight blue velvet that must have cost more than the Black Pine Pack's entire autumn grain budget. Her hands were folded in front of her, and her expression was one of serene, practiced modesty, the kind of modesty that says, "I have already won, and I am being gracious about it." She was also, Seraphine noticed with a clarity that surprised her, wearing a betrothal chain that had been forged at least 3 months ago. The silver had already developed the specific patina that comes from being worn daily against skin. 3 months. Roderick had been planning this for 3 months, through the autumn harvest that Seraphine had managed, through the Salt Road dispute that Seraphine had negotiated, through the silver mine transport crisis that Seraphine had solved by riding out to the mountain pass herself in early snow. 3 months of smiling at her across the breakfast table, of accepting her reports on grain stores, of letting her work herself raw to hold his pack together, while this chain cooled against another woman's throat. Seraphine, for the first time since he had entered the hall, he looked back. She saw it in his eyes. Not cruelty, not hatred, not even indifference. Something worse. Relief. He was relieved to be done with her. Not because he had never loved her. He had, she knew that with the certainty of 6 years of shared nights and whispered promises and the specific way he used to press his face against her hair and breathe her in like she was the only clean air in the world. He had loved her. But loving Seraphine Marlowe came with a price that Roderick Blackpine had decided he could no longer afford. She was too competent, too necessary, too much. When Aluna runs the grain stores and the Salt Road and the medicine supply and the merchant contacts and the elder relationships, the Alpha starts to feel like a figurehead. When Aluna solves crises faster than the Alpha hears about them, the pack starts to look at her first and him second. When Aluna is brilliant and capable and golden-haired and universally respected, the Alpha starts to wonder if his pack is really his pack or hers. Roderick had found a solution. He had found Aluna who came with an army, a treasury, and a family name that would make other packs think twice before challenging him, and who would, by all appearances, be content to stand at his side and look decorative. It was, from a certain angle, almost reasonable. From where Seraphine was standing, it was the most breathtaking betrayal she had ever experienced, and she had once watched a merchant try to sell her a crate of sawdust labeled as cinnamon. "Seraphine," Roderick said, and his voice was careful now, the way it got when he was handling something he expected to break. "I know this is not what you anticipated for tonight's ceremony. I want you to know that your years of service to this pack—" "Service," Seraphine repeated, and the word came out flat and precise, like a coin dropped on stone. "Are deeply valued. A home has been prepared for you at the eastern edge of the territory, near the border crossing. It's comfortable, warm. You'll receive a monthly allowance and—" "The eastern border cottage," Seraphine said. "The one with the leak in the north wall that I submitted a repair request for in August, which was denied because, and I am quoting your steward, there are higher priorities for the carpentry budget." A small, horrible silence. Elder Marin, seated at the front table, made a sound that was very carefully not a laugh. "The cottage has been repaired," Roderick said tightly. "How wonderful. It only took replacing your Luna to get a roof patched." Seraphine's voice was perfectly level. She was aware, with the strange, doubled vision that comes in moments of absolute crisis, that every person in this hall was watching her for the breakdown. They were waiting for tears, for begging, for the satisfying spectacle of a discarded woman falling apart in public so that everyone could feel sorry for her and then go back to their venison. She would not give them that. She would give them something much worse. "You mentioned my years of service," Seraphine said, and she reached into the embroidered belt pouch at her waist, the one she had sewn herself, the one that contained the tools of every function she had performed for this pack for 6 years. "Let me return what belongs to the position." She pulled out a heavy iron key on a leather cord. The granary key. Main store, reserve store, emergency winter reserve. She placed it on the edge of the dais. The river merchants renew the winter grain credit in 11 days. They renew it with me because I am the one who has paid them, fed their drivers, and kept their caravans safe for 6 years. If I am no longer Luna, 40% of your winter grain stops at the river. The hall went quiet enough for the fire to sound loud. She drew out a small leather medicine ledger. The Ashwick herb women supply our feverfew, willow bark, and wound seal poultice. Their payment is due in 6 days. They do not extend credit to men who remember sick rooms only when they need a heroic speech beside one. She set the ledger beside the key. Without this, the deep winter comes with no fever medicine and no wound treatment. Then came a wooden passage token stamped with pine and road. The Salt Road Agreement. Renewed 9 days ago in my name because Greymarch trusts the woman who actually sends the wagons on time. The token clicked against the stone. If I am removed, this token dies in 30 days. 3 objects. Grain, medicine, road. Even the oldest grandmother in the hall could count them, and every person understood what they meant. Food, survival, and a way out of winter. Seraphine left the rest in her pouch. The firewood contracts, the tallow notes, the cobbler favors, the elder grudges, the little human details that made a pack function. She would not drown the room in paper. She would let them discover those losses one by one when the first child needed boots and the first hearth ran cold. There, Seraphine said, the position of Luna returned in full. She looked at Alara Winterborn, who was standing very still, her pale eyes moving over the key, the medicine ledger, and the road token with an expression Seraphine recognized. The expression of a woman doing rapid mental arithmetic and not liking the sum. I'm sure Lady Winterborn will find it manageable, Seraphine said pleasantly. She looks like a woman who enjoys a challenge. Roderick's jaw was tight. Seraphine, this display is unnecessary. Is it? She turned to him, and for the first time something hot flickered in her golden brown eyes. You are replacing me in front of the entire pack on the night of the moon vow. You have been planning this for at least 3 months, based on the age of Lady Winterborn's betrothal chain. You did not tell me. You did not warn me. You let me organize this feast, polish the ceremonial silver, braid my hair in the old way, and walk into this hall believing I was still your Luna. If anyone in this room is putting on an unnecessary display, Roderick, it is not me. The silence was so complete that Seraphine heard Elder Marin's knuckles crack. You may keep the eastern border cottage, Seraphine said, and the monthly allowance. I will not be a pensioned-off inconvenience living at the edge of your territory, tending a garden while your new Luna wears my ceremonial silver and pretends she knows where the salt comes from. She reached up and unclipped the thin silver chain at her throat, the Luna's chain, the one Roderick had clasped there 6 years ago with shaking hands and wet eyes. She set it on the dais with the rest. What I will take, she said, are my personal effects, my private account ledger, my correspondence, and my own savings, which I earned through personal trade commissions before I was your Luna and which are mine by law. Roderick's face had gone through several colors during her speech. It had settled on a pale, rigid mask that Seraphine knew meant he was furious and knew he had no right to be. Where will you go? He asked. That, Seraphine said, is no longer your concern. She turned and walked toward the great doors of the Moonvow Hall. The crowd parted for her, not out of respect, not yet, but out of the universal human instinct to get out of the way of a woman who is clearly capable of setting a building on fire with nothing but her organizational skills. Behind her, she heard Alara Winterborn's voice for the first time, soft and musical and perfectly modulated. Should someone go after her? And Roderick's voice, tight and defensive. She'll be fine, she always is. Seraphine's fingers curled into fists at her sides, her nails biting into her palms. The pain was useful. It kept her spine straight and her eyes dry for the 47 steps it took to cross the hall, push open the iron-banded doors, and step into the freezing November night. The doors closed behind her. She made it to the courtyard wall before her knees buckled. Chapter 2. the border, and the rabbit. The pain of a severed mate bond is not metaphorical. Seraphine had read about it in the old texts, the scrolls she had cataloged and preserved in the Black Pine Archive, because no one else thought the archive was worth maintaining. The texts described it as a rending of the soul thread, which she had always thought was poetic exaggeration. It was not poetic exaggeration. It hit her 3 miles past the border marker, where Black Pine territory ended and the wild borderlands began. She was walking fast, her winter cloak pulled tight, her satchel of account ledgers and correspondence banging against her hip, her breath coming in sharp white clouds. The November rain had started an hour ago, thin and bitter and relentless. The kind of rain that doesn't soak you all at once, but seeps in through every seam until you realize you are wet to the bone and your fingers have stopped working. The bond snapped like a bowstring. Seraphine gasped, stumbled, and went down on her hands and knees in the mud of the border road. The pain was enormous, not in one place but everywhere, as though every nerve in her body had been stripped raw and dragged across gravel. Her wolf, the silver wolf that lived behind her ribs, howled, a long, thin, terrible sound that only she could hear. He does not want us. She pressed her forehead to the mud and breathed. Rain ran down her neck, under her collar, along her spine. Her fingers clawed at the ground. The account ledger in her satchel, the one she had refused to leave behind, the one that contained every debt, every credit, every supply line, every contact, every piece of information that made the Black Pine Pack a functioning entity, rather than a collection of wolves arguing over scraps, pressed its leather corner into her ribs like a second heartbeat. She did not let go of it. She got up. She wiped her face, which accomplished nothing because the rain immediately replaced everything she had wiped away. She picked up her satchel, slung it across her body, and kept walking. The borderway station appeared through the rain like a smudge of warm light, a low stone building with a thatched roof and a stable yard, sitting at the junction of the East Road and the old trade path that ran south to the river towns. It was not a grand building. It was the kind of place where traveling merchants, lone riders, and border wolves stopped for a hot meal and a dry corner before continuing into uncertain territory. Seraphine pushed open the door and was hit by the smell of wood smoke, mutton stew, and wet dog. The common room was half full. A few merchants hunched over their bowls, a pair of border guards playing dice, an old woman knitting in the chimney corner. No one looked up. In the borderlands, people minded their own business. It was safer that way. The innkeeper, a stout woman with arms like fence posts and a face that suggested she had once headbutted a mule and the mule had lost, looked Seraphine up and down. "Room? If you have one." "Last one on the left, upstairs. 3 coppers, suppers included. You look like you need it." Seraphine paid. Her fingers were shaking, but she counted the coins accurately. She would always count coins accurately. The world could end, and Seraphine Marlowe would die with her accounts balanced. She climbed the stairs, found the room, a narrow cell with a straw mattress, a woolen blanket, and a window that looked out onto the stable yard, and sat on the bed. She did not cry. She sat very still with her hands on her account ledger and waited for the trembling to stop. It did not stop. She went back downstairs. The kitchen was accessible through a side door that someone had left propped open with a brick. Seraphine told herself she was looking for hot water for her face, or perhaps a candle, or perhaps any small practical task that would give her hands something to do besides shake. What she found behind the kitchen's back door, in the narrow, muddy alley where the kitchen scraps were thrown, was a rabbit. It was small and white and round, with ears that were slightly too long for its body and eyes the color of dark cherries. It was sitting in the rain next to an overturned crate, and it was eating a cabbage leaf, or rather, it was clutching a cabbage leaf in its mouth with the grim, unshakable determination of a creature that had decided this cabbage leaf was the hill it would die on, while the kitchen boy, a lanky teenager with a dripping nose, tried to shoo it away with a broom. "Get off. That's not for you, you stupid. Go on, get." The boy swiped the broom at the rabbit. The rabbit did not move. It hunched lower over its cabbage leaf and chewed faster. I said get. Another swipe. The rabbit dodged the broom with a small, indignant hop and resumed chewing. The cabbage leaf was now considerably smaller, but the rabbit showed no intention of surrendering what remained. You little, the boy raised the broom higher. Stop. Seraphine's voice came out sharper than she intended. The boy turned, saw a golden-haired woman standing in the kitchen doorway with rain in her hair and murder in her eyes, and prudently lowered the broom. It's just a rabbit, miss. It keeps getting into the vegetable stores. Then fix the latch on your vegetable stores. Seraphine walked past the boy, crouched in the mud. She was already so wet and filthy that a little more made no difference, and looked at the rabbit. The rabbit looked at her. It had stopped chewing. The cabbage leaf hung from its mouth like a limp green flag. Its dark cherry eyes were very round, and its nose was twitching in the rapid, assessing way that rabbits' noses twitch when they are deciding whether a new person is a threat, a friend, or irrelevant. Seraphine held out her hand, palm up, fingers relaxed. She did not move. She barely breathed. The rabbit considered her for a long moment. Then it hopped forward, one small, careful hop, and pressed its nose against her fingertips. Its nose was cold and wet and impossibly soft, and it twitched 3 times against her skin before the rabbit apparently decided that Seraphine was acceptable. It hopped into her lap. Absurdly warm, the way small animals always are, as though they contain a furnace somewhere beneath their fur that is wildly out of proportion to their size. It settled against her stomach, tucked its feet underneath itself, and continued eating the cabbage leaf. Seraphine sat in the mud in the rain behind a border way station kitchen, holding a rabbit that had been thrown out of the only place it knew for the crime of trying to feed itself, and she thought, well, we match. She carried it inside. No one stopped her. The innkeeper looked at the rabbit, looked at Seraphine's face, and said nothing. There were some faces you did not argue with. Upstairs, Seraphine set the rabbit on the bed. It explored the blanket with the thorough, methodical intensity of a creature cataloging its new territory, circled 3 times, and flopped onto its side. Seraphine sat beside it, opened her account ledger, and began to read. The numbers were familiar, comforting. Every line in this ledger represented a relationship she had built, a deal she had struck, a crisis she had solved. The river merchants, the Salt Road Passage, the Heartwood Carriers Guild, the Herb Women of Ashwick, the quarterly grain deliveries, the winter tallow supply, the emergency credit line with the Greymark banking house. These were hers, not Roderick's, not the Blackpine Pack's, hers. She had built them with her own mind, her own hands, her own relentless competence. And when Roderick Blackpine stood in his Moonvow Hall with his beautiful northern bride and realized that his granary was emptying, his salt road was closing, his medicine supply was vanishing, his silver mine wagons were not arriving, and his elders were asking uncomfortable questions about where the woman who actually ran everything had gone, these relationships would still be hers. The rabbit nudged its nose against her ankle. She reached down and stroked its ears without looking, her eyes still on the ledger. I'm going to need a name for you, she said. The rabbit thumped one hind leg against the mattress. A small, decisive thump, the sound a rabbit makes when it is either content or staking a claim. Clover, Seraphine said, because you are small, round, and apparently impossible to uproot. Clover thumped again and went to sleep. Chapter 3. The Border Wolf King. The rain stopped sometime before dawn. Seraphine knew this because she had not slept. The broken bond ached in her chest like a cracked rib, pulsing with every heartbeat, and she had heard every shift in the weather, every creak of the building, every snore from the common room below. She heard the riders arrive at first light. Not merchants. Merchants traveled in carts. These were mounted riders, heavy horses, moving in formation. She heard the jingle of tack, the low murmur of voices accustomed to command, and distantly, the whine of wolves. Border wolves, big ones, from the sound of their vocal range. Seraphine was dressed and packed in 3 minutes. She had not unpacked much. She was a woman who understood that situations could change quickly, and she kept her belongings in a state of permanent readiness. The only concession to the night was that Clover was now riding in the front fold of her cloak, a warm white lump against her collarbone, ears flat, nose twitching. She came down the stairs with her satchel on her hip, her golden hair in a single damp braid, her spine straight, and her face arranged in the polite, competent mask she had worn for 6 years of managing a pack that did not appreciate her. The common room was full of soldiers. Not soldiers in the ragged, improvised way that pack warriors sometimes were. These were uniformed, dark leather and gray wool, steel-reinforced bracers, weapons that were clean and oiled and clearly used regularly. They moved with the easy discipline of men who had been well-trained and well-fed and who answered to someone they genuinely respected rather than merely feared. At the center of the room, seated at the largest table with a map spread before him and a cup of tea steaming at his elbow, was the most handsome man Seraphine had ever seen. She was irritated by this, publicly humiliated, thrown out of her home, and severed from her mate bond. Her clothes were mud-stained, her hair was a disaster, and she had a rabbit in her cloak. She was not in the mood to notice that a man was handsome, but the universe, apparently, did not care about her mood. He was tall, taller than Roderick, which she would not have thought possible, since Roderick's height had been one of his most weaponized attributes. His hair was dark, nearly black, cut shorter than the black pine fashion, and his jaw was the kind of jaw that made portrait painters weep with gratitude. He had a scar that ran from his left temple to his cheekbone, not disfiguring, merely interesting, the kind of scar that suggested a story worth hearing. His eyes were a deep, startling blue, and they were currently fixed on the map in front of him with an expression of calm, focused intelligence that Seraphine recognized because she saw it in her own mirror every morning. He looked up. Their eyes met. Seraphine felt absurdly as though the floor had tilted. Not dramatically, not the sweeping, world-stopping way the bards described it. Just a small, subtle shift, as though gravity had quietly rearranged itself around a new center. The man's blue eyes moved from her face to her mud-stained cloak, to the satchel on her hip, specifically to the account ledger visible through the satchel's unbuckled flap, and back to her face. His expression did not change, but something in his gaze sharpened, the way a blade sharpens when it finds the right angle against a whetstone. "You're the Black Pine Luna," he said. It was not a question. It was a statement, delivered in a voice like dark oak, deep, steady, and suggesting structural integrity. "Former," Seraphine corrected. "As of when?" "Last night." One of the soldiers near the door glanced up. The innkeeper, who had been very carefully pretending to polish a mug, stopped pretending. The man at the table studied her for a moment longer. Then he said, "Sit down." "I don't know who you are." "Cale Ashbourne, Alpha of the Iron Ridge Border Pack, Lord Warden of the Eastern March." He paused. "Some people call me the Border Wolf King, which is dramatic, but not entirely inaccurate." Seraphine had heard of him. Everyone had heard of him. Cale Ashbourne held the borderlands between the settled Pack territories and the wild country to the east, a vast, ungoverned stretch of mountain, forest, and trade road that every merchant, every caravan, and every supply chain had to cross. He controlled the passes, the bridges, the river crossings, and the way station network. He was, in practical terms, the man who decided what moved through the borderlands and what did not. He was also, she realized with a start, the man who had been quietly investigating irregularities on the northern trade roads for the past 6 months. She knew this because the Heartwood Carriers Guildmaster had mentioned it, nervously, in his last letter to her. "Sit down," he said again, and this time it was softer. Not a command, an offer. She sat. Clover, disturbed by the change in altitude, shifted inside her cloak. A tiny white ear poked above Seraphine's collar, rotated once like a small furry periscope, and disappeared back into the fabric. Cale Ashbourne looked at the place where the ear had been. He looked at Seraphine. One corner of his mouth moved by approximately 1/16 of an inch. "Is there a rabbit in your cloak?" he asked. "There might be." Does it have a name? Clover. Of course it does. He took a sip of his tea. You crossed the border last night, in the rain, without escort, with a broken mate bond and, his eyes dropped to her satchel again, what appears to be a full set of commercial account records. I was not offered an escort. I was offered a leaking cottage and a monthly allowance. And you chose the rain. The rain doesn't condescend to me. That 1/16 of an inch movement at the corner of his mouth happened again. Seraphine was beginning to suspect it was his version of a smile. I've been watching the Black Pine Pack's trade activity for 6 months, he said. Specifically, the Northern supply contracts that changed hands after the Winterbourne betrothal was announced. Grain prices tripled on the Black Pine purchase orders. The Salt Road usage fees doubled. The Silver Mine transport contract was renegotiated with a penalty clause that didn't exist before. He paused. All of these changes happened after Lady Winterbourne's family began their involvement with the Black Pine Pack, and all of the original contracts that kept prices stable were negotiated by one person. He looked at her. You, he said. Yes. The Black Pine Pack is approximately 30 days from a full winter supply crisis. Their grain will run short in 3 weeks. Their Salt Road closes in a month. Their medicine supply ends in 6 days. Their silver mine transport is in default. Yes. And the woman who built and maintained every single one of those supply lines is currently sitting in a border way station with a rabbit in her cloak. Yes. Cale Ashbourne set down his tea. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and regarded her with an expression that contained, in carefully measured proportions, respect, calculation, and something that Seraphine could not immediately identify, but that made the broken place in her chest feel slightly less broken. Lady Marlowe, he said, I believe you and I have a great deal to discuss. I am no longer a lady of anything. That, he said, is a matter of perspective and paperwork. He stood. He was even taller standing, which seemed structurally unnecessary. I'm riding to Iron Ridge Keep this morning. My steward has been telling me for 6 months that our border trade network needs an overhaul, and I have been ignoring him because I don't have anyone who understands supply chains well enough to do it. You clearly do. He paused. I can offer you border passage rights, a room in the keep, access to the Merchant Guild Hall, and the legal status of a trade advisor under my protection. In return, I would like you to look at my trade routes and tell me where they're bleeding money. Seraphine stared at him. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a starting position. What you do with it is your decision. You don't know me. I know your work. I've been reading the trade records from the Black Pine Pack's supply chain for 6 months. I know that before you took over, their grain costs were 30% higher. I know that the Salt Road agreement you negotiated saved them 600 silver marks a year. I know that the Heartwood Carriers Guildmaster calls you the only honest dealer north of the river. And I know, he paused, and his blue eyes held hers with an intensity that made Clover thump nervously against her collarbone, that a man who had all of that and threw it away to marry a Winterbourne is either a fool or a coward, and I don't particularly care which. The common room was very quiet. Every innkeeper and the old woman knitting in the chimney corner were pretending very hard not to listen. Seraphine's throat was tight. Not from tears, she would not cry in front of this man, in front of anyone, but from the unfamiliar sensation of being seen. Not pitied, not managed, not handled, seen. I have a rabbit, she said, because she was the kind of person who disclosed potential complications up front. I noticed. She eats cabbage leaves and thumps when she's startled. My keep has a kitchen garden. She'll fit right in. He extended his hand, not to shake, to help her stand, the way a man offers his hand when he wants a woman to know that he considers her his equal, and that the hand is offered by choice, not obligation. Seraphine looked at his hand. It was large and scarred and steady. She took it. His grip was warm and firm and lasted exactly 1 second longer than strictly necessary. When he let go, his fingers brushed her palm in a way that could have been accidental but was not. Clover thumped. Your rabbit approves, Kale said. My rabbit approves of very little. She merely tolerates what she cannot kick. That 16th of an inch smile happened a third time, and Seraphine realized, with a sensation like stepping off a cliff into unexpectedly warm water, that she wanted to make it happen again. Chapter 4: Iron Ridge Keep. Iron Ridge Keep sat on a granite bluff above the Border River, where the old trade road forked, one branch running north to the settled Pack territories, the other running south to the river port towns and the merchant guilds beyond. It was not a beautiful building. It was a functional one: thick walls, deep cellars, wide gates designed for wagons, and a stable yard that could hold 50 horses. It looked like a building that had been designed by someone who valued efficiency over aesthetics, which was exactly the kind of building Seraphine felt most comfortable in. Kale Ashbourne had given her a room in the East Tower. Not the finest room in the keep, but a good one, with a window that overlooked the river and the trade road, a fireplace that drew properly, and a desk. The desk was large. Seraphine approved of large desks. She had spent 6 years managing the Black Pine Pack's entire commercial infrastructure from a writing table that was slightly too small because Roderick had never thought to ask if she needed a bigger one. Clover was given the run of the kitchen garden, which she investigated with the methodical intensity of a land surveyor, and from which she returned each evening with dirt on her nose and an expression of profound satisfaction. Within 3 days, Seraphine had mapped the Iron Ridge trade network. Within a week, she had found where it was bleeding money. The border trade routes were a mess, not from corruption but from neglect. Kale Ashbourne was a superb military commander and a respected alpha, but he had the commercial instincts of a brick. His steward, a well-meaning man named Aldrich, had been doing his best, but his best involved paying whatever price the merchants quoted and hoping for the best. Seraphine did not hope for the best. Seraphine negotiated. She started with the grain merchants. The Iron Ridge Pack was buying winter grain from 3 separate suppliers at 3 different prices, none of which had been compared or renegotiated in 2 years. Seraphine sat in the Merchant Guild Hall, a drafty stone building in the border town below the keep, and invited all 3 suppliers to the same meeting. Gentlemen, she said with Clover tucked invisibly under her heavy wool skirt, I notice that you are each charging the Iron Ridge Pack a different price for the same grade of grain. This suggests either that grain quality varies dramatically between your warehouses, which would concern me, or that you have been taking advantage of the fact that no one here has bothered to compare your invoices, which would also concern me. The grain merchants looked at each other. They looked at the golden-haired woman sitting at the head of the table with her hands folded and her expression pleasant and her eyes sharp enough to cut glass. They lowered their prices, all 3 of them, voluntarily. That, Aldrich said afterward with the dazed expression of a man who has just witnessed a miracle, has never happened before. It happens, Seraphine said, when you read the invoices. By the end of the 2nd week, she had renegotiated the tallow contract, restructured the firewood supply chain, established a new credit arrangement with the Riverport warehouses, and set up a rotating delivery schedule for the border way stations that cut transport costs by a third. The merchants liked her. The guild leaders respected her. The border guards, who had been eating terrible food for years because no one managed the supply contracts for the waystation kitchens, practically worshipped her. Kale watched all of this. He watched from the doorways of meeting rooms, from the upper gallery of the guild hall, from the parapet of his keep where he stood in the mornings with his tea and his maps and his scar catching the winter light. He watched Seraphine Marlowe walk into rooms full of men who had been cheating his pack for years and walk out with better terms, fair prices, and signed agreements. He watched her crouch in the kitchen garden to let Clover climb into her hands, her golden hair falling over her shoulder, her face soft in a way it never was when other people were looking. He watched, and he said very little, because Kale Ashbourne was a man who understood that some things are better observed than discussed. But his soldiers noticed, Aldrich noticed, the cook noticed, the stable master noticed. Everyone in Iron Ridge Keep noticed that their alpha, who had never in anyone's memory shown personal interest in any woman, tracked Seraphine Marlowe's movements through the keep like a compass needle finding north. Chapter 5. The First Cloak. The first ambiguity-destroying moment happened 16 days after Seraphine's arrival, on the night of the first real snowstorm. She had been in the guild hall until well past dark, finalizing a salt contract with a coastal trader who had the negotiating style of a weasel and the attention span of a gnat. The deal was done. Favorable terms, reliable delivery, penalty clause for late shipments that Seraphine had insisted on because she had once waited 3 weeks for a late salt delivery and had no intention of ever doing so again, and she was walking back to the keep through the narrow streets of the border town. The snow came suddenly, as border snowstorms do, not a gentle beginning, but a wall of white, horizontal, and blinding, driven by a wind that turned the air into knives. Seraphine, who had been too focused on the salt contract to check the sky before leaving the guild hall, found herself blind and freezing in a street she barely knew. Clover, who had been riding under her skirt hem, her preferred mode of transport in cold weather, pressed against Seraphine's ankle like a warm, furry boot, began thumping. Not the small, conversational thump of contentment, the rapid, staccato thump of alarm. Thump, thump, thump. Seraphine could feel the vibration through the sole of her boot. "I know," she muttered, pressing against a building wall. "I know. I can't see either." The wind screamed. Snow plastered her hair to her face, found every gap in her cloak, bit through her gloves. The broken bond in her chest throbbed. It always throbbed more in the cold, as though the severed thread was trying to pull her back to a warmth that no longer existed. And then a cloak dropped over her shoulders. Not thrown, placed. With precision, with weight, with the careful deliberateness of a man who had practiced moving in darkness and bad weather until it was as natural to him as breathing. The cloak was enormous. Heavy, dark wool lined with fur, still warm from the body that had been wearing it, and it smelled of pine smoke and cold steel and something underneath both of those things that was simply, unmistakably, him. "The guild hall closed an hour ago," Cale said, and his voice was very close, cutting through the wind from directly above her left ear. "I sent Aldrich to walk you back. He said you were still arguing about penalty clauses." "I won the argument." "I would have been surprised if you hadn't." His hand found her elbow, unerringly, in total darkness and blinding snow, and steadied her. "Can you walk?" "Of course I can walk." "You're shaking." "I'm cold. Those are different things." A pause. She could not see his face, but she was absolutely certain that the 16th of an inch smile was happening. "Walk with me then," he said. "The keep is 4 streets north. I know the way blind." "You came out in a blizzard to find me." "I came out in a blizzard to check the border watch. Finding you was coincidence." "You're not wearing a cloak." "I have a thick constitution." "You're standing in a blizzard in a shirt." "A heavy shirt." Seraphine wanted to argue further, but the wind chose that moment to gust so hard that she staggered, and Cale's hand on her elbow tightened, and she found herself pressed against his side, his very solid, very warm, very shirt-clad side, and his arm came around her shoulders to hold the cloak closed against the wind, and she discovered that the warmth of a large man in a snowstorm is a profoundly convincing argument against further protest. They walked. His arm stayed. Clover, from her position under Seraphine's skirt hem, produced a single, contented thump. Halfway to the keep, Seraphine became aware that Cale was shielding her from the wind with his body. Not obviously, not dramatically, but with the quiet, automatic precision of a man for whom protecting others was as reflexive as breathing. He had positioned himself on her windward side. His arm across her shoulders was angled to block the snow from hitting her face. He was, she realized, freezing. "You should take your cloak back," she said. "No. You'll get frostbite. I'll get warm by the fire." "You are the most stubborn." This, from a woman who argued about penalty clauses for 3 hours in a room with a dying fire. The fire was adequate. The fire was 2 embers and an optimistic stick. She laughed. It was a small, involuntary sound, startled out of her by the sheer absurdity of standing in a blizzard, arguing about fire quality with a man who had given her his cloak and was pretending he wasn't cold. It was the first time she had laughed since the Moonvow Hall, and the sound of it surprised her so much that she stopped walking. Cale stopped too. In the narrow space between snow gusts, she caught a glimpse of his face, snow in his dark hair, ice on his scar, and his blue eyes looking at her with an expression that was not the 16th of an inch smile. It was something larger, something unguarded, something that he shut down almost immediately, but not quite fast enough. He had been looking at her the way Roderick used to look at her, except that Roderick's version of that look had always contained, underneath the warmth, a flicker of something wary, a man admiring a fire that he feared might burn him. Cale's version contained no fear at all. "We should keep walking," he said, and his voice was perfectly steady, because Cale Ashbourne could control his voice the way other men controlled their sword arms. They kept walking. His arms stayed around her shoulders. The cloak smelled like pine smoke and cold steel in him, and Seraphine stored that information in the same part of her mind where she kept her most important accounts, the things too valuable to write down, in case someone tried to take them away. Chapter 6: The Rotting Pack. While Seraphine was building trade routes and accepting cloaks from blue-eyed border kings, the Black Pine Pack was dying. Not literally, not yet, but the slow, grinding death of a community that has lost its infrastructure and doesn't realize it until the food runs out. The grain ran short in the third week, exactly as Seraphine had predicted. The river merchants declined to renew the credit arrangement without Seraphine's personal guarantee, exactly as she had warned. The Salt Road closed when the Greymark elders received no renewal request from anyone they recognized, and the medicine supply from the Ashwick herb women ended when the payment was 6 days late. The silver mine wagons stopped coming on the 22nd day. Roderick Blackpine discovered, in the sharp and unforgiving classroom of consequence, that running a pack required more than being tall, handsome, and commanding. It required knowing where the food came from. It required knowing who to pay and when and how much. It required knowing that the cobbler who made boots for the pack's children at cost did so because someone delivered his wife's cheese to market, and that if the cheese deliveries stopped, the boots stopped, and if the boots stopped, children walked barefoot in snow. It required, in short, Seraphine Marlowe. And Seraphine Marlowe was gone. Alara Winterbourne, to her credit, was not entirely useless. She was, in fact, much more capable than Roderick had expected, but her capabilities lay in a direction that made his blood run cold as the winter deepened. She began with the pack's debts. "The Black Pine Pack owes 2,000 silver marks to the Heartwood Carriers Guild," she told Roderick on the fourth morning, her voice soft and measured, her pale eyes scanning a ledger that she had produced from her own traveling case. "And 1,400 marks to the river merchants, and 800 to the Salt Road Licensing Authority. Total outstanding obligations, 4,200 marks. Roderick stared at her. "I didn't know." "Your former Luna managed these debts personally. She kept them rolling through a combination of personal guarantees, bartered services, and partial payments timed to cash flow projections." Alara set the ledger down. She was, I must admit, remarkably skilled. "Can you do the same?" "I could," she folded her hands. "But it would be simpler to consolidate." "Consolidate how?" "My family's banking house can purchase the outstanding debts from the individual creditors. Instead of owing money to a dozen different people, the Black Pine Pack would owe money to one, the Winterbourne family." She smiled. It was a lovely smile, warm and reassuring and utterly without warmth. "It's more efficient." Roderick, who did not understand debt consolidation the way Seraphine would have, and who was too proud to admit this, agreed. This was the second worst decision he had ever made. The first was letting Seraphine walk out of the Moonvow Hall. Because Alara Winterbourne had not come to the Black Pine Pack to be a Luna. She had come to be a locksmith, fitting the tumblers of debt and dependency into place until the entire pack was a door that her family could open at will. Within 2 weeks, the Winterbourne family held every major debt the Black Pine Pack owed. The grain supply was rerouted through Winterbourne warehouses at prices that were technically fair but practically ruinous. The pack's guard rotation was supplemented by Northern soldiers for the pack's protection during this difficult transition, who answered to Alara's family steward, not to Roderick. The pack's treasury key, which Roderick had always carried, was placed in a lockbox to which Alara held the second key as a precaution against the debts. She was absorbing the pack, piece by piece, contract by contract, coin by coin, and she was doing it with such impeccable courtesy, such flawless legal justification, and such a beautifully concerned expression that Roderick did not fully understand what was happening until the day he tried to authorize a firewood purchase and was told by his own steward that the purchase needed Lady Winterbourne's countersignature. "She controls the countersignature?" Roderick said, and his voice was very quiet. His steward, a nervous man who had replaced the previous steward, who had been loyal to Seraphine and had been reassigned to stable duty by Alara's suggestion, nodded miserably. Roderick sat in his study, which had once been Seraphine's study before it was his, and which still smelled faintly of the lavender sachet she had kept in the desk drawer, and he thought about what he had done. He had traded a woman who loved his pack for a woman who was buying it. Chapter 7. The Stone Keep Accounts. The 4th week brought 2 things to Ironridge Keep, the first snow thaw and the old Black Pine records keeper. His name was Osric, and he was 73 years old, and he had served the Black Pine Pack for 50 of those years as historian, archivist, and keeper of the ancient pack charter. He arrived at Ironridge on a mule, wearing a coat that had been patched so many times it resembled a quilt with aspirations, carrying a leather case that he held against his chest as though it contained his own heart. "Lady Marlowe," he said when Seraphine met him in the keep's great hall, and his old voice cracked on her name. "I'm not Lady Marlowe anymore, Osric." You are, because he never filed the severance." Seraphine went very still. "What?" Osric opened the leather case with trembling fingers and pulled out a sheet of parchment. Old, official, bearing the Black Pine Pack's seal. When an alpha dissolves a mate bond and removes a Luna from her position, the ancient charter requires a formal severance to be recorded by the pack historian and witnessed by 3 elders. The alpha must sign it. The historian must seal it. Until this is done, the former Luna retains her legal standing as a member of the pack. He held up the parchment. It was blank, unsigned, unsealed. "He forgot," Osric said. "He was so busy with the new Luna and the northern contracts and the spectacle of it all that he forgot to complete the severance. I waited. I prepared the document. He never came to sign it." Seraphine's mind was doing what it always did in moments of crisis, running calculations at a speed that would have made an abacus weep. If the severance was never completed, she was still, legally, under the ancient Black Pine Charter, a member of the pack, not Luna. She had publicly relinquished the title, but a member. With membership came certain rights, including the right to invoke the Charter's most ancient and least used provision, the right of stewardship. "Osric," she said slowly, "the stewardship clause." The old man's eyes lit up. Chapter 7, Article 3. When the Alpha's governance endangers the pack's survival through debt, famine, or loss of sovereign territory, any full member of the pack may petition for temporary stewardship, provided they can demonstrate both the means and the intent to restore the pack to solvency. And if the Alpha has incurred debts that threaten to transfer pack lands to an outside family, the stewardship petitioner may acquire those debts and present them as evidence of the Alpha's unfitness, triggering a public. Seraphine looked at the unsigned severance document. She looked at Osric. She looked at the account ledger in her satchel, which contained every debt, every credit, every supply line, and every contact she had built over 6 years. "Osric," she said, "I need you to tell me the exact amount of every debt the Winterbourne family has purchased from the Black Pine Pack's creditors." Osric told her. Seraphine sat down at her large, beautiful desk in Ironridge Keep, opened her account ledger, and began to plan. That night, she was still working when Cale found her. The account room in the East Tower was lit by 4 candles and a fire that had burned low. Seraphine was surrounded by papers, debt records, charter copies, trade route maps, supply calculations. Her golden hair had come loose from its braid and was falling across the ledger she was writing in, and she was so absorbed that she did not hear Cale enter until he set a cup of tea on the desk beside her. She startled. Clover, who had been sleeping under the desk in a nest of discarded draft paper, thumped once. "It's past midnight," Cale said. "I'm aware. You've been in here since supper. You didn't eat supper." "I ate bread." "A bread crust does not constitute supper. It constitutes bread, which is a component of supper." He pulled a chair from the corner, set it beside hers, close but not touching, and sat. He looked at the papers spread across the desk, and Seraphine watched his blue eyes move over the numbers, the contracts, the charter language, with the quick, sharp comprehension of a man who might not love commerce but understood power. "You're buying the Black Pine debts," he said. "I'm considering it." "With what funds?" "My personal savings, my trade commissions from the past 6 years, and," she hesitated, "a loan." "From?" "I don't know yet." Cale was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'll fund it." Seraphine turned to look at him. They were very close. Close enough that she could see the individual threads of silver in his blue eyes, close enough to smell the pine smoke on his shirt, close enough that when he shifted his weight, his knee brushed hers under the desk. "I can't accept that," she said. "Why not?" "Because it would make me beholden to you. And I have spent 6 years being beholden to a man who used my competence and discarded my person, and I will not. It's not a gift, it's an investment." His voice was steady. "I invest in the Black Pine debt acquisition. When you take stewardship of the pack, you fold the Black Pine trade routes into the border network, which benefits my territory. I get a return on my investment through reduced trade costs and increased traffic. It's business." Seraphine stared at him. She knew it was not entirely business. She could see it in the set of his jaw, in the way his hand rested on the desk near hers, not touching, but close, as though it was taking conscious effort to maintain the distance. "And if I fail?" she asked. "You won't." "You don't know that." "I know you argued about salt contract penalty clauses for 3 hours with a dying fire. You don't fail. You outlast." From under the desk, Clover thumped. Then, slowly, she hopped out from her paper nest, crossed the cold stone floor, and climbed onto Cale's boot. He looked down. Clover looked up. She was sitting on his boot like a small, furry auditor, her dark cherry eyes fixed on his face, her nose twitching. She thumped once, not the alarm thump, not the contentment thump. The assessment thump, the thump that said, "I am evaluating you, and you should be aware that my..." Cale, slowly and carefully, reached down and offered his hand, palm up. Clover sniffed his fingers. She sniffed for a long time, an unreasonably long time, as though she were conducting a thorough olfactory background check. Then she pressed her nose against his knuckle and hopped off his boot. "She approves," Seraphine said, and her voice was softer than she had intended. "Does her approval matter?" "It does to me." They looked at each other across the desk. The fire crackled, the candles flickered, the papers rustled in a draft from the window, and outside, the border wind carried the sound of the river and the distant howl of wolves in the wild country. "Take the loan," Cale said. "On what terms?" "Standard interest. 1-year repayment, no personal obligations." He paused. "I won't use money to own you, Seraphine. No one will ever use anything to own you again." It was the first time he had used her given name. It sounded different in his voice, not smaller the way it had sometimes sounded in Roderick's mouth, as though he were trying to contain it, but larger, expansive, like a name that had room to grow. "All right," she said. "All right? I accept the loan, standard terms, and I want the interest rate in writing before dawn." The 16th of an inch smile became, for the first time, a full smile. It transformed his face. It made him look younger, warmer, and so devastatingly handsome that Seraphine's stomach did something structurally inadvisable. "I'll have it drafted," he said, and stood, and his hand brushed her shoulder as he passed, the lightest possible touch, barely there, a whisper of warmth through her wool sleeve. She did not sleep that night, but the reason had changed. Chapter 8. The Salt Road Gambit. Seraphine Marlowe bought the Black Pine Pack's debts in 8 days. It was, by any standard, a masterpiece of financial warfare. She approached each creditor personally: the Heartwood Carriers Guild, the River Merchants, the Salt Road Authority, the medicine suppliers, and purchased their claims on the Black Pine Pack at a discount. The creditors were happy to sell. They had no confidence in Roderick Blackpine's ability to pay. They had no relationship with Alara Winterbourne, and they trusted Seraphine implicitly. The total cost was 3,600 marks, less than the face value of the debts, because Seraphine negotiated discounts with the same ruthless efficiency she applied to grain contracts. Kale's loan covered the bulk of it. Her personal savings covered the rest. When it was done, Seraphine held every debt that Alara Winterbourne had purchased from the original creditors. Because Alara had bought the debts from the same people Seraphine had relationships with, and Seraphine had simply offered to buy the debts from Alara's family at a price slightly higher than what the Winterbournes had paid, making it look like a profitable exit rather than a strategic defeat. The Winterbournes, who thought in terms of interest rates rather than relationships, accepted the buyout. They did not realize until later that they had just sold their entire leverage over the Black Pine Pack to the woman the pack had thrown away. "You bought our own debts out from under us?" Alara's steward said, staring at the signed transfer documents that Seraphine's courier had delivered to the Black Pine Pack Hall. "I bought them from your family, yes. At a profit to your family. Your Lord Father should be pleased." The steward was not pleased. Alara Winterbourne, when she heard, was significantly less pleased. And Lord Aldous Winterbourne, the patriarch of the Northern family, who had spent 3 months engineering the perfect acquisition of a vulnerable pack in its territory, was so profoundly displeased that he broke a quill and had to sit down. But the documents were signed. The law was clear. The debts belonged to Seraphine Marlowe. While the debt acquisition was unfolding, 2 women arrived at Iron Ridge Keep. The first was Marta, the former warehouse keeper of the Black Pine Pack's central grain store. She was a broad-shouldered woman in her 40s with calloused hands and a face like a friendly boulder. She had managed the Black Pine Granary for 15 years, knew every sack of grain by weight and origin, and had been dismissed by Alara Winterbourne and replaced with a northern-appointed manager who didn't know the difference between winter wheat and spring barley. "They fired me," Marta said, standing in Seraphine's account room with her hat in her hands and her chin trembling. "After 15 years. The northern woman said they were restructuring warehouse operations, which apparently means replacing everyone who knows anything with people who don't, but who answer to her." "How bad is the granary?" Seraphine asked. 2 weeks of supplies, maybe less. The northern grain shipments are coming, but they're delayed and the quality is poor. I saw the manifests before they locked me out. Half of it is feed grain, not milling grain. The pack will have bread, but it'll be the kind of bread that breaks teeth. The second arrival was Brenna, a widow from the border town who ran a small caravan operation, 3 wagons, 5 drivers, and a reputation for delivering anything, anywhere, in any weather. She was 50 years old, had 4 arms like a blacksmith, and had been trying to get a trade license from the Iron Ridge Border Authority for 2 years. "I heard you're the woman who's reorganizing the border trade," Brenna said, standing in the guild hall with her arms crossed and her gray hair pulled back in a no-nonsense knot. "I also heard you're the woman the Black Pine Alpha threw out on her ear at the Moon Vow, which makes you either the unluckiest woman in the borderlands or the most interesting. I'm betting on interesting." Seraphine liked her immediately. "I need a grain run," Seraphine said. "Fast, reliable, and quiet. 40 wagons of good grain from the Riverport warehouses to a staging point on the Black Pine border. Can you do it?" 40 wagons? Brenna's eyebrows rose. "That's a full winter supply for a medium pack." "Yes, When? Before the tribunal. Brenna grinned. It was the grin of a woman who had been waiting her entire life for someone to ask her to do something this ambitious. "I'll do it in 12 days, she said, "but I want the trade license." Done. Brenna left. Marta stayed, and Seraphine put her to work organizing the grain logistics, purchase orders, quality checks, wagon assignments, delivery schedules. Marta was thrilled. She had not been this useful since being fired, and usefulness was the air she breathed. "It's like old times," Marta said, sorting manifests with the speed of a woman who dreamed in inventory counts, except better, because this time the person I'm working for actually knows what she's doing and appreciates it. Seraphine looked up from her ledger. "Roderick appreciated your work." "Roderick didn't know I existed until the granary was empty. You knew my name on your second day." Marta paused. "That's the difference, Lady Marlowe. You see the people who keep things running. He only saw the things." Chapter 9. The Riding Lesson. On the 29th day, Cale took Seraphine to inspect the southern trade route. This was technically a business necessity. The southern route ran through a mountain pass that was critical to the grain shipments Brenna was organizing, and Seraphine needed to see the terrain, the bridge conditions, and the way station capacity. It was also less technically the first time they had been alone together outside the keep since the night of the blizzard cloak. The southern pass was beautiful and terrible. A narrow road cut into the side of a granite gorge with the river roaring 100 feet below and the mountain rising sheer above. The winter sun turned the ice on the rocks into diamonds, and the air was so cold and clean that breathing it felt like drinking water from a glacial stream. Seraphine was a competent rider, but she was not a mountain rider. The border horses were different from the gentle, road-trained animals she had ridden in the Black Pine lowlands. They were sure-footed, opinionated, and alarmingly comfortable with heights. Her horse, a gray mare named Slate, who had the personality of a mildly intoxicated duchess, decided halfway through the pass that the best route was 6 inches from the edge of a 200-foot cliff. "Pull her left," Cale said from behind her. "I am pulling her left. She is ignoring me." "She's testing you. Pull harder." "If I pull any harder, I will pull myself off this horse and into the gorge." Cale brought his horse alongside hers. There was barely room for 2 horses abreast on the narrow road, which meant his leg was pressed against hers, his shoulder almost touching hers, and his hand was available to reach over and steady her reins. He did reach over. His hand closed over hers on the reins, large and warm and absolutely steady, and he guided the mare away from the edge with a calm, practiced pressure that the horse immediately respected. "She listens to you," Seraphine said, and she was annoyed to discover that her voice was slightly breathless and not from the altitude. "She listens to confidence. Horses and wolves are the same. They follow the person who believes they know where they're going." "I know where I'm going." "I know you do." His hand was still on hers. The reins were steady. The horse was walking calmly. There was no practical reason for his hand to remain. It remained. "You can let go," Seraphine said. "I could." "The horse is fine." "The horse is fine." "Then why?" "Because your hand is cold and mine is warm, and I am choosing to interpret this as a practical concern rather than an emotional one." Seraphine turned her head to look at him. He was very close, close enough that she could count the shades of blue in his eyes, close enough to see the way the winter light caught on the fine scar across his cheekbone. He was looking at her with that expression again, the one from the blizzard, the one that contained no fear. "Is it a practical concern?" she asked. "Absolutely. Frostbitten fingers cannot sign contracts, and you have a tribunal to prepare for." "That is the most unromantic thing anyone has ever said to me." "I am a deeply unromantic man." His thumb moved across the back of her hand. Once, slowly. "Ask anyone." From beneath Seraphine's heavy riding skirt there was a soft, rapid thumping. Thump, thump, thump. Clover had strong opinions about the current situation. Cale looked at Seraphine's skirt. He looked at Seraphine. The full smile appeared again, the one that transformed his entire face and made Seraphine's internal organs rearrange themselves. "Your chaperone disapproves," he said. "My chaperone approves. That's the approval thump." "How many thumps does she have?" "7. I have a chart."